Section 661. All of this intelligence had come from General Nadu, and Gao Li used it as the backbone of his plan. Riguchila, you pilot the Lila and warp to Yeleda's coordinates. Drop me off, then immediately spatial warp away so you won't be trapped by the Hell Legion they'll send. Gao Li handed out orders to the new crew aboard the Lila. Over the past month, Riguchila's family hadn't been idle. They'd already learned how to operate the ship. All right, Riguchila said, then hesitated. Are you really going into Yeleda alone? Isn't that? Don't worry, Gao Li replied with a faint smile. I've studied their forces and Yeleda's internal layout inside and out. I can do this as efficiently as possible. Besides, you and your family were dragged into this because of us. I won't let you be endangered again. I'm grateful you can help as support. Riguchila nodded. As a warrior on Bistar, he understood resolve when he saw it. Take care, he said. Gao Li took a deep breath and buckled the Force driver to his waist. The Lila would drop him at Yaleta and warp away. He needed a reliable way to get inside. Of all his equipment, nothing was more suited for space infiltration than Kamen Rider 4's. Rocket, he announced, inserting the rocket switch. Launcher, the next. Drill, scissors. He activated each astronomical switch in turn, then raised his right hand as the count began. 3, 2, 1. Transform. Cosmic energy coalesced into a jet-like stream and wrapped around him. Next up, he said as he went to the controls and personally piloted the Lila toward Yeleda. A hive-shaped warp field opened ahead, one cell revealing Yeleda's black and red outer shell. Warp. As the ship traversed, Gao Li opened the hatch and vaulted into space. He waved back. Riguchila nodded and immediately took over the Lila, warping away. My lord, an unidentified flying object is approaching Yeleta, a subordinate reported in the control hall. And, just now, we detected a signal from 89P13 for about 13 seconds, another added. Supreme Evolution narrowed his eyes at the holographic image, Gao Li, displayed before him. He came from the vessel that emitted the 89P13 signal, probably an accomplice, to come alone, call it reckless or courageous. He sneered. Dispatch the Hell Legion to capture him, interrogate him about 89P13's location. Yes, sir. The Hell Legion poured into space. Gao Li, backed by the rocket switch, had already reached high speed. The Force Rider system flashed an alarm. Inside Force's helmet, his layered compound eye crystal lens gave him an enormous field of view and extreme light sensitivity, even to the faint light of distant Pluto, so he saw the Hell Legion closing in at the first instant. Of course they wouldn't let me dock without a fight, he muttered. He had expected this, which was why he'd chosen this set of switches. Launcher on. Missiles screamed out, detonating into expanding fireballs that shredded swarms of Hell Legion craft. If any got close, his drill and scissors switches were terrifying in close combat. The drill could boost finishing move power, and the scissors could cut like a rider kick, slicing through 5-centimeter thick steel with ease. These were his tools for clearing attackers who dared close the distance. The launcher emptied quickly, but Gao Li had prepared multiple launcher switches and swapped them in fast. He became an endlessly firing artillery platform, explosions punctuating the void as the Hell Legion pressed harder. Using the rocket switch, he dodged and changed vectors, weaving like a gorilla in space and herding the attackers into a funnel. From a distance, it would have looked like a trail of monsters being led by a single rider, their armor flaring and tearing with each strike. Gao Li knew space guerrilla tactics couldn't hold forever. The Hell Legion's numbers were overwhelming. He adjusted his course and headed straight for the spaceport. Of course, their leader saw his intent. It would make a perfect pincer. Another squad of Hell Legion curved in from the front, cutting off the direct line to the port. Hesitation would only doom him. Limit break. He slammed the lever on the Force driver. With the drill as a spearhead and rocket as propulsion, he launched himself at the intercepting formation. The impact blew apart several leading enemies, but reinforcements seemed endless. Gao Li pulled the lever again. Limit break. This was a special application, a double-stacked limit break. It overloaded the system and would temporarily disable the two involved astronomical switches afterwards, but in exchange the modules swelled with cosmic energy. The rocket and drill became enormous, one a super-accelerating rocket, the other a giant cosmic drill. Rider rocket drill big universe kick detonated through the enemy line, shattering the barrier. The explosion ripped through the Hell Legion, blocking his path, but the rear ranks immediately filled the breach. Gowli's cosmic energy was draining fast. "Damn, did I underestimate Supreme Evolution's forces?" he muttered. "Trying to solo a cosmic overlord might be unrealistic." The energy gauge crawled toward empty and his chest tightened, but he refused to give up. Even facing the absolute time point marked by the Ancient One, Gowli would not surrender. He pulled the lever a third time and roared, "Break through for me!" Cosmic energy collapsed to near zero, but it still wasn't enough for a triple limit break. Then, as if from nowhere, a blue energy surge fed into the system and supplied the missing power. Gowli didn't notice the source. All his focus was on the fight. A galactic pattern blossomed behind him, and a cataclysmic explosion cleaved through the Hell Legion like a supernova. In the inferno, Gowli, his force armor ragged, smashed into the spaceport. "I'm in," he rolled, stood, and canceled his force transformation. Before the enemy could respond, he snapped the Kabuto Zector to his belt. The new avatar of the Hell Legion's foe had arrived. "Transform! Cast off!" Armor fragments from the incoming Hell Legion slammed into the port structure at 2,000 meters per second. Each piece became a kinetic projectile, shredding the first wave of attackers. Those who survived faced something worse. Change. Beetle. Gowli tapped the side buckle, then added, "Clock up." Everything around him didn't slow. Rather, Gowli accelerated his own time flow relative to the world. That disparity was the heart of his plan. The battles on Biststar and General Nadu's intelligence had made one thing clear. The Hell Legion was unmatched in sheer modification and strength, but not in cognition speed. No technology, not even Supreme Evolutions, could speed up minds 1,000-fold. If you could outpace an enemy's perception, you could neutralize overwhelming power. "And, Ace Pilot, activate," he said, triggering his second trump card. Clock Up was devastatingly effective, but it had endurance limits. Too long and both the rider system and his body would suffer. Yoletta was nearly the size of a dwarf planet, its garrison vast. Gowli didn't plan to sweep every soldier. He needed to reach his objective and make the rest of Yoletta's forces irrelevant. Larger artificial ships took longer for Ace Pilot to fully take effect, so given Yoletta's scale, Gowli would have the time he needed to find what he wanted. He strode through static rows of enemy soldiers like someone walking a garden path, his route direct and without detours. By the time he passed, the Hell Legion lay cut through, leaving a bloody lane. On the monitors before Supreme Evolution, the footage showed only outcomes, not process. It was as if the Hell Legion had been annihilated in an instant with no struggle. When he replayed the engagement in slow motion and examined the instruments, the truth became clear. Supreme Evolution's eyes widened. His veins stood out in anger and disbelief. At his level, with sensor analysis and playback, he finally understood what Gowli had just done. Supreme Evolution was baffled. He had always prided himself on understanding the limits of technology, but this was something else entirely. How had Gowli accelerated so fast? How could the armor hold together without tearing apart? Where was the wind resistance? Why didn't any of the expected physical effects show up at that speed? How could the wearer's reactions and body withstand such acceleration? Tachyon applications were a level of black technology even he couldn't fully grasp. "My lord, traces of the intruder have been found," a subordinate reported, snapping Supreme Evolution out of his thoughts. Gowli had clearly slipped out of extreme clock up temporarily after reaching its limit. "My lord, shall we send the Hell Legion?" another voice asked. Supreme Evolution's face darkened. He hesitated. From the last encounter, sending the Hell Legion would likely mean sending them to their deaths. But since their lives were mere expendables to him, why not use them to gather intel on the intruder? "Send them. Try to immobilize him," he ordered, voice calm and cold. "I will deal with the intruder personally." The subordinate hesitated, then obeyed. Supreme Evolution held no foolish pride. After being surprised by Rocket's attack, he had upgraded himself with his highest technology. He could now manipulate gravity. Its magnitude and direction were under his command. With gravity's might, even incredible speed was meaningless. If gravity was strong enough, nothing, not even light, could escape. It was the authority of the world itself. Meanwhile, in the corridor, Gao Li ran hard toward the research database. The decryption codes for all creation's emergency stop devices are in here, he muttered as he planned his next moves. And Supreme Evolution's projects are archived here too. I can grab everything at once. Then, just as the database came into view, a squad of intercepting Hell Legion materialized. Grandma used to say, "I don't hold grudges, but those who block me die," Gao Li said dryly. The Hell Legion captain stared, baffled by a war god grandmother. Gao Li already had the Kabuto kunai gun in reverse grip. He extended an enormous ion beam blade and swept it through them. "Fire!" The captain barked, but Gao Li took several hits without dodging, sweeping a devastating 10-meter arc, the avalanche slash. Though 10 meters sounds modest, it was longer than a classroom and cut through the formation like a scythe. Explosions rocked the corridor as everything in the arc was pulverized. Only a handful of grunts remained. 1, 2, 3. Gao Li hit a hidden full-speed switch sequence on the Kabuto Zector, snapped the central beetle shell shut, reset the horn to Rider configuration, opened it again, and shouted, "Rider kick!" He leaped, channeling condensed tachyons through the horn into his right foot. The Rider kick struck cleanly, engulfing the remaining Hell Legion in flames. Gao Li took a few steadying breaths and then pushed into the database. He couldn't keep using ultimate attacks. The Rider form had weaker defenses than the masked form, and alien weapons packed more punch than Earth's. He grabbed the on-duty technicians and forced them to retrieve all files on Rocket. He found the emergency stop decryption code and immediately transmitted it to Lila. The medical AI would run the decrypt and start Rocket's first aid protocols automatically. Finally, the most urgent thing is done, Gao Li breathed, relaxing for the first time. The rest is research data. Pack it up and get it to me. He prodded the alien clerk with his gun. "Please, don't kill us." The clerk begged. "You have nothing to worry about," Gao Li said with false cheer. "Grandma said I'm the most trustworthy person she's ever met. If I say I won't kill you, I won't kill you." They hurried, stuffing Supreme Evolution's research into the storage device. Gao Li watched the data flowing in, heart racing at the possibilities. Then a thunderous roar cut the room open from behind. Supreme Evolution had detected the theft of his intellectual property, an unforgivable offense. An invisible wave slammed into Gao Li. He barely protected the storage device before he was flung through the air, crashing into the wall. He smashed through a dozen more walls from the force. "Cough," Gao Li managed. He was dazed, barely conscious of the carnage. The data room was annihilated by Supreme Evolution's power. Backups existed, and the clerical staff who aided Gao Li were expendable in Supreme Evolution's eyes. With a single strike, everything within 100 meters was crushed. Everyone except Gao Li was killed. "That was close. I almost got forced out of my transformation," Gao Li thought grimly. General Nadu had never mentioned this level of power. If Gao Li's body under the armor hadn't been incredibly strong, and if he hadn't momentarily amplified his physique with the golden eye to near superhuman levels, he would have been broken. "It's you, the little bug who stole my supreme wisdom," Supreme Evolution snarled, pointing across the rubble. He had slowed gravity deliberately now, strong enough to trap Gao Li, but not strong enough to kill. "I didn't expect you to be so durable, couldn't crush you with one stomp. Fine, you will pay with endless suffering." Gao Li grunted for air, golden light flaring in his pupils. Supreme Evolution didn't believe his claim, and taunted, "Tell me where 8913 is from here. If you're honest, you might lessen your pain before death." Gao Li smirked despite the pressure. "You know what your only reason for defeat is?" "What?" Supreme Evolution sneered. "What nonsense. Clearly it's you. It's that you didn't kill me decisively the first chance you had." At that moment, a blue Zector streaked out at impossible speed and snapped onto Gao Li's belt. "Transform," it commanded. The Gatak Zector. After leaving Bistar and realizing Rocket still had time, Gao Li had prepared in advance, using mature technology to build a Kamen Rider Gatak. Gatak and Kabuto were from the same series. Gao Li had the resources and schematics to produce variants as needed. He'd already done similar work with G3X and Phase models. Making a Gatak was only natural. Supreme Evolution panicked and ramped up gravity, but the Gatak body in masked form had extraordinary defensive integrity. Unlike the Kabuto Rider form that had been shredded, Gatak held together under pressure. Gao Li seized the moment and activated the Gatak's shoulder weapons, the Gatak Vulcan. Bang! 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 Ion beam rounds poured out at an incredible rate, 5,000 rounds per minute, filling the space like a sea of tracer fire. Before Hyperform or the perfect Zector's 100-insect sword existed, this was the most devastating sustained firepower the series had produced. Impossible. How could I be taken down by Mir? Supreme Evolution's thought died in the light of the onslaught. He never got a chance to react. Hole after hole appeared in his body until, at last, he collapsed and the terrifying gravity he'd been wielding vanished. Gao Li fell through the huge breach in the wall and hit the floor. He collapsed, coughing, every bone feeling as if it might disintegrate. The Gatak armor in masked form sparked and took some dents, but it had held. Supreme Evolution's control over one of the universe's fundamental forces had been fearsome, but his defenses were poor. Gao Li's combination of high attack and high defense and his willingness to strike when his enemy let his guard down had finally exposed that fatal weakness. Section 63. If Supreme Evolution had been given another chance to counterattack, it would have been hard to say who would lose. My lord? Supreme Evolution, my lord. Damn it. How could this be? He actually killed the great Supreme Evolution, my lord. The forces inside Yeleta were truly as numerous as cattle. Reinforcements arrived in waves, and their eyes fell immediately on Supreme Evolution's corpse. Rage swept through them like wildfire, their attention fixed on the armored figure slowly rising opposite them. As expected, they're endless. Activating the ace pilot was the right move. Gao Li gritted his teeth against bone-deep pain, flipped the horn of the steel fight insect instrument, and ordered, "Cast off! Change! Stag beetle!" Fragments of armor impacted outward at terrifying speeds, becoming kinetic projectiles that cleared a path. Before the remaining Hell Legion could react, Gao Li slapped his side buckle, entered clock up, and left the scene. He didn't need to annihilate every enemy himself. The ace pilot would handle that. He couldn't afford to stay and fight to the death. I can't keep clock up on for very long in this state. This battle isn't over yet. In Yalita's control room, the situation spiraled into unprecedented chaos. The quantum propulsion engine is experiencing abnormal energy feedback. Propulsion is imbalanced. Yalita is decelerating and deviating from its trajectory. Find the cause and repair it now. Activate the secondary energy core. Do it immediately. No, the secondary core is anomalous. Energy supply has plummeted. All detection systems are down. Report, environmental control and inertial navigation are suffering unknown interference. Yalita's attitude is unstable. The flight path is twisting. Oh no, the gas regeneration circulator is malfunctioning. Oxygen and carbon dioxide levels are rapidly losing balance. Piece after piece of bad news drained every face pale with the same realization. Yalita was going to crash. Chapter 87. Goodbye, my friend. Things happened suddenly. Malfunctions that normally occurred once in a million years erupted all at once. They couldn't keep up with repairs. Just as one problem was fixed, 10 more sprang up. Everyone's expressions went grim. It felt like an invisible hand was dragging Yaleta into the abyss. The Hell Legion was everywhere inside Yaleta. As soon as Gao Li's clock-up ended, a squad of soldiers converged on him. Intense fighting burst out, corridors filled with continuous gunfire. Put on, Gao Li resummoned his scattered armor. Even without clock-up, the steel fight rider form compensated with raw firepower. While his armor reassembled, he connected the positive blade and negative blade of the steel fight twin blades and cut through attackers. Rider cutting! Explosions rose, shockwaves severed surrounding objects, and the corridor became littered with broken limbs and wreckage. The armor finally reformed, and Gao Li shifted into rider form. The steel fight Vulcan cannon spun into action, firing terrifying light rounds at nearly 100 per second and sweeping through the Hell Legion like a torrent. Screams never stopped. Gao Li's firepower was like a one-man army, keeping the Hell Legion down, but enemies attacked from another direction in flying vehicles. The Vulcan cannon wasn't omnidirectional. It couldn't defend everywhere at once. One flank of the cannon was blasted apart, and Gao Li retaliated by slicing a flying attacker in half with his twin blades. As his firepower waned, the Hell Legion seized the initiative. Gao Li took another direct hit from a high-explosive shell, and was thrown dozens of meters. Even with armor, the blow disoriented him. He was still badly damaged from his earlier fight with Supreme Evolution. Endless enemy troops and overwhelming ammunition pressed him. For a time, Gao Li was forced onto the defensive. Then Yeleta's outer hull suddenly blew open. Strikes continued through the breach, reaching deep into the interior until they slowed near Gao Li. "What's going on?" soldiers shouted in alarm. "Ha ha! Supreme Evolution, your rocket grandpa is here for revenge," came a familiar, wild laugh from the smoke. The voice made it clear Rocket had fully recovered. "And incidentally, I'm here to rescue my poor, weak, much-needed friend Gao Li. How does it feel to be saved by Lord Rocket, who traveled thousands of miles? Are you grateful enough to prostrate yourself?" Gao Li felt a rush of relief, so much so that he kicked him. Rocket yelped, was thrown several meters, scrambled up and glared. "Bastard! What are you doing? If I hadn't transformed into Kamen Rider 4s earlier, that kick would have seriously hurt me." "You scoundrel," Gao Li retorted. "Don't forget who helped fix your 4's driver." Rocket grumbled but said nothing. He'd learned his lesson and had surely prepared full protection before piloting Lila in to rescue him. Otherwise, he would have been useless. "Enough talk. Where's Supreme Evolution? This time I won't run. I want to punch him myself." Gao Li waved a hand. "Then you can only find him in the underworld. Supreme Evolution has already been killed by me." "Huh?" Rocket was stunned. Supreme Evolution, the godlike figure in many civilizations, had been killed so simply. Rage rose across the Hell Legion. How dare these two ignore them? "I will kill you both to avenge my Lord Supreme Evolution," the Legion commander roared. Rocket stepped up and stood shoulder to shoulder with Gao Li. "Well then, I should thank you for this." "No need. By the way, this is our first time fighting side by side." "Don't hold me back," Rocket laughed, fist-bumping Gao Li. "Let's go." Gao Li's Vulcan cannon and Rocket's launcher module unleashed a synchronized barrage. The Vulcan cannon could compress energy into plasma fireballs for massive explosions. Rocket's launcher sent missiles streaking. The combined blast swept through the enemy lines, and Rocket charged in, switching astronomical switches with lethal flexibility. He was a weapon master. A rider system like 4's, which could arm its limbs freely, suited him perfectly. Limit break. Rocket's rider kick ignited a column of fire. Gao Li's clock up had cooled but was just able to be activated. "Clock up," he slapped his side buckle. Explosions slowed to a crawl, and Gao Li moved through the battlefield, seeing Rocket fighting fiercely and the Hell Legion's ghastly faces in frozen motion. He sliced and struck through them without pause. In pure body blows, the riders weren't inherently superior to the Hell Legion, but Gao Li had a cheat. No matter how vast the army, to him they were targets. Clock over. When clock up ended, Gao Li reappeared beside Rocket. Around them, not a single Hell Legion soldier remained standing. "Even if we cleared the area, it's temporary. They'll be replenished quickly," Gao Li said from experience. Rocket understood. "Perfect. Let's get on Lila and leave." Gao Li hesitated, then forced himself to step back. "No, you go alone. I can't go with you to Lila." "What did you say?" Rocket demanded, incredulous, voice rising. "Why? This is no time to joke around." Gao Li looked helpless. "I'm not joking. Do you remember I'm a magic user? I put a magic curse on myself. Any man-made flying vehicle I board within 24 hours will crash." Rocket went quiet. He didn't understand magic, but he understood why Gao Li would curse himself, to counter Supreme Evolution's forces. And he understood it was for Rocket's sake, too. He didn't want to abandon Gao Li. "No, I've already decided not to run anymore." Gao Li sighed and tried to reason with him. "You're not running away. While I accessed Supreme Evolution's research results, I also checked his database. Although he's only in a transitional stage of creating civilizations and no new races have formed in Yeleta yet, there are experimental animals. You can take time to save them." "You used to be an experimental subject, right? You should understand them, so you're not running. You're saving lives. Go, Rocket." "They need you." Gao Li sent a coordinate to Rocket, but Rocket still hung his head, unwilling to move. "Rocket, if you don't leave now, Ragushila and his family won't leave either. Do you want them to die with you?" Rocket looked up. "Then let them go first." Before he could finish, Gao Li moved faster, snatching Rocket's 4's driver off and canceling his transformation. As the device's developer, Gowli knew the quickest way to disarm it. Rocket froze. Gowli, you'll only get in my way if you stay. Go, Gowli said, then forcefully threw Rocket and the For's driver toward Lila, where Regu-Tsi-La was peering out. Section 64. Regu-Tsi-La had just poked his head out, having heard the battle noises stop, when he saw Rocket and the For's driver, still completely unaware of what had happened. Let go of me, Rocket struggled wildly. From a distance, Gowli called out to him. Rocket! Rocket glanced over and saw Gowli toss him an astronomical switch. When Rocket caught it, he recognized it as the failed composite switch from before. This is a parting gift, Gowli said plainly. Just in case. Honestly, I felt bad after our argument the other day. I was a little convinced by you, so I secretly synthesized a composite switch that night. At their parting, Gowli was unusually frank. I even made fun of you for it afterward. I'm really sorry. You truly are an incredible super genius. I infused this with a little magic. Carry it as a protection charm, or keep it as a memento. Although the composite switch couldn't be used as intended, Gowli's enchantment turned it into a one-time shield, a potential lifesaver for Rocket. Be careful. Don't get hurt again. Goodbye, my friend. Rocket's eyes went red. Gowli, I don't want to. Take Rocket away now, Gowli shouted to Regu-Tsi-La. Regu-Tsi-La didn't know Rocket well, but he knew Gowli and obeyed without question. Don't stop me. Rocket protested desperately, but the Beastie Star people were stubborn. They forced him aboard and slammed the hatch shut. As the Lila sped away, Gowli sat down where he was and let out a long sigh. Now, which plan should I choose? Gowli had more than one escape plan. He had a whole set, actually 2 complete plans. First, he wouldn't try to hijack any ship inside Yeleta. For the 24 hours that the ace pilot effect remained active, any artificial flying vehicle would be forced to crash. The smaller the vehicle, the quicker it would go down. That was why Gowli refused to board the Lila. If he had, he would have dragged Rocket and Regu-Tsi-La's whole family to their deaths. He considered transforming into Kamen Rider Fords and using the rocket module to escape. After all, that was how he had gotten into Yeleta, but he rejected it quickly. For's was armor, and the armor's propulsion was a man-made flight system controlled and piloted by him. That, too, would count as an artificial craft and be forced to crash. By the same logic, letting Insector fly him or letting Rocket transform and carry him would be just as dangerous. They would likely crash the moment they tried to lift off. Gowli mulled it over and found 2 usable but imperfect options. The first was to transform into Kamen Rider Wizard Endless Style, use the Connect ability to return to Earth, and shrink the Connect magic circle to wrist size to avoid the explosion. The Connect circle couldn't let a living being fully pass through, but a part could. If Gowli kept one hand out of the circle, it wouldn't count as a complete pass-through. The rest of his body would rely on Endless Style's defensive power to withstand the impact. The downside, he wasn't sure Endless Style's physical defense could survive the blast from a crashing asteroid-sized ship. He might come back missing a hand if he misjudged. The second method was to transform into For's, Phase, or Wizard Endless Style, armors that could survive in space, and then use the Cosmic Skater ability to teleport randomly anywhere in the universe. He could combine this with the first plan, teleport away, immediately use the Connect circle to get home, keeping his hand out, and then wait for the ace pilot effect to expire. But that plan relied on luck. If he teleported onto a star, inside a planet, or into a black hole, it would be instant death. If the destination was too remote, the Lila's locator system might not be able to track him. Rocket's communicator could pinpoint the Lila, and the Lila could reverse locate the communicator, which is how Rocket had found him earlier. But no alien positioning system covered the entire universe. If Rocket couldn't find him, Gowli could be stranded, drifting forever. Both plans have drawbacks, Gowli mused. The first might cost me a hand. The second is pure luck. If luck's good, everyone's saved. If luck's bad, the price is even higher. He felt a pounding headache and couldn't decide. Even imagining the worst, if Cosmic Skater dumped him into a black hole, felt like a death sentence. On board the Lila, Rocket knelt on the deck, powerless. Regu-Tsi-La had been piloting for a while before remembering. By the way, how's Gowli going to leave? Did he tell you? Rocket forced a bitter laugh. Leave? Gowlee can't leave anymore. I know him well. If he had a good way to save himself, he wouldn't keep it secret. He'd tell us, Raguchila said. Rocket wasn't an idiot. If Gowlee had a way, he would have said so. But Gowlee had said nothing. Then what do we do? Let's turn around and pick him up. Rocket shook his head. Gowlee has his reasons for not being able to board the Lila. If he doesn't want to, no one can force him. Rationally, he was right, but Rocket's voice went lower and lower. Emotionally, he couldn't accept it. They had just reunited after so much effort. Gowlee was a friend he'd found against all odds. Rocket grabbed his head. Reguchi La Huaya and the others hovered uncertainly, not daring to approach. This time, I ran away again. I didn't want to run. I don't want to let my friends down again. But what should I do? How can I save him? Gowlee had gone into Supreme Evolution's base alone to save him. Now Rocket was saved, but he hadn't saved Gowlee in return. It felt like a terrible one-sided trade. Rocket wished, with a bitter edge to it, that Gowlee hadn't saved him at all. Why did everything have to turn out imperfect? Why couldn't he have a perfect happy ending? Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! Rocket slammed his fists into the deck again and again until blood stung his knuckles. Tears blurred his vision. He couldn't tell if he hated fate or himself. Gowlee had taken on Supreme Evolution to save Rocket, had accomplished a miracle. When it was Rocket's turn, why was he so helpless? As he lashed out in frustration, the composite switch flew from his hand, hit the wall, and bounced back. Rocket stopped and stared at it. Memories flickered, working together on the Lila, cheering over breakthroughs, arguing late into the night about research, toasting loudly in the ship's bar, standing at the porthole and watching celestial wonders. Now those moments felt snatched away. The more you lose something, the more precious it seems. By the time Rocket realized how much their friendship meant, it felt too late. Gowlee, you called me a super genius? Rocket murmured. That's not true. How could a super genius be as useless as me? How could I be such trash? Damn it! Tears fell silently, each drop catching a faint blue light. The composite switch Gowlee had given him began to glow. What Rocket didn't know was that the Space Stone's energy and magic were both sleeping within Gowlee's soul. When Gowlee drew magic from his soul to enchant objects, when he lent magic to Rocket, or infused magic into the composite switch, a trace of Space Stone energy always came along. Now both Rocket's body and the composite switch held that energy, and the two began to resonate. But the resonance needed one more thing: the emotion essential to complete the 40th switch, friendship. In Kamen Rider 4's, the Kamen Rider Club had synthesized switches 1 through 39, and the 40th switch remained missing. Kengo Utahoshi, the son of the astronomical switch developer Rokuro Utahoshi, discovered that the 40th cosmic switch required the bond of friendship between Gentaro Kisaragi and every member of the Kamen Rider Club. Friendship itself was a crucial component in the astronomical switch technology. Rocket's intense feelings now bridged that missing component and triggered the resonance. Rocket reached instinctively for the composite switch. Space Stone energy linked with the switch, and framed by Rocket's friendship, the energy filled the composite switch. The Space Stone acted as an advanced universal energy node, allowing the composite switch to undergo its final evolution. The device flashed brilliantly. Everyone shielded their eyes until the light settled, revealing the switch's true form, a new switch with a deep blue shell, like a tiny tesseract. How is this possible? Rocket whispered. Could this be the cosmic switch from the schematic? The 40th switch, once only on design blueprints, was now in Rocket's hand. He didn't know exactly how it had come to be, but there was no time to dwell on that. If it worked, that was all that mattered. Just wait. Rocket gripped the cosmic switch. I'm coming to save you, Gowlee. One major goal of the astronomical switch project had been to enable safe warp navigation using the FORS system, and the cosmic switch was the product of that research. As one of the FORS driver's developers, Rocket knew the 40th switch should allow the most flexible warp navigation in the universe, far simpler than a ship's jump drive. Where stellar civilizations needed massive vessels to jump through space, the 40th switch could bend space itself and create wormholes anywhere. 3, 2, 1. Transform. Rocket changed into Kamen Rider 4's, took a steadying breath, and inserted the new cosmic switch. The astronomical switch flared with red and blue light the moment Rocket flipped open its cover. He pressed the button without hesitation. Cosmic, on. In an instant, all the astronomical switches stored in the Lila burst free and merged into Rocket's body. Light poured from him in brilliant colors, and with a thrilling roar, a cerulean rider materialized, wielding the Balasan Holy Sword. Kamen Rider 4's Cosmic States. This is the power of the universe, Rocket thought, clenching his fist. He'd never felt such a surge of energy. It was as if the entire cosmos was supporting him. Still, he didn't linger in the feeling. The urgent task remained unfinished. Cosmic! He slid the 40 switch into the bottom of the Balasan Holy Sword, raised it, and a vast silvery white wormhole tore open before him, revealing the inside of Yeleda beyond. Gao Li! Rocket shouted as he leapt through. On the other side, Gao Li turned at the cry and stared in stunned recognition at Rocket in his cosmic states. A Force rider of that small stature was unmistakable. You're Rocket? Gao Li's eyes were full of curiosity. Cosmic states? How did you do that? How did you complete the 40 switch without the necessary nodes? Rocket waved him off. Is now the time to explain? Hurry and come with me. Where are we going? You said boards in artificial vehicles would crash. So why risk an artificial craft? I'll open a wormhole to a habitable planet, Biststar, and send you straight there. Gao Li agreed. Rocket opened another wormhole and they spatially transferred together into a forest on Biststar. This ability is so convenient, Gao Li admitted. You can go anywhere. Can you send me back to Earth? Rocket shook his head. Not yet. I don't know Earth's coordinates. If I did, it'd be easy. I'll look them up when I get back. Can I try it? Gao Li asked. Rocket rolled his eyes. No, that cosmic switch is sized to my body. It won't work with a standard Force driver. Gao Li shrugged, and then asked about the cosmic switch itself. How did it form? Why didn't I know you had something like this? Rocket hesitated. He wanted to show off, but the truth was he didn't know. I don't know, he admitted. The composite switch suddenly glowed, and when I held it, the cosmic switch completed itself. Gao Li scratched his head, baffled. He wondered why the composite switch had refused to become a cosmic switch in his hands, but immediately transformed in Rocket's. Did the cosmic switch dislike him? When the ace pilot duration ended, Gao Li returned to the Lila. He no longer cared about the ruined evolution throne Yeleda. The interstellar news had already reported its destruction. His real prize from the mission was Supreme Evolution's research data, especially their biological files. Unfortunately, the data transfer had been interrupted when the attackers arrived, leaving some regret. Still, there was a lot to digest. Gao Li was eager to thoroughly test Rocket's 40 switch. After a series of experiments, he fell into deep thought. There was a trace of energy in the switch that felt like the Tesseract, specifically Space Stone energy. He retraced his infusion procedures. Aside from the switch's initial creation, he had only injected his magic. Why would his magic take on Space Stone characteristics? Gao Li, once the Lord of Magic in the DC universe, usually had an acute sensitivity to mystical energies. But having entered the Marvel universe, his status had been suppressed, and his perception was like looking through a veil, less clear than before. Still, even through that veil, he could sense a faint Space Stone signature mixed into his magic. Where had it come from? After long thought, he formed a daring hypothesis. Perhaps the missing Tesseract hadn't been taken at all, but somehow merged with him, either into his body or his soul. He scanned his body with instruments and found nothing unusual. It remained possible that only a trace of the Tesseract's energy had been absorbed, tinting his magic. He had no way to examine his soul at present, so he set the question aside and turned his attention to Supreme Evolution's technology. 2 months passed. Gao Li absorbed as much of the research as he could, his knowledge and experience expanding rapidly. Armed with his own expertise and selected Supreme Evolution findings, he finally felt confident enough to refine the modification experiment, to obtain a Kamen Rider physique without harmful side effects. When the improvements were complete, Gao Li's first test subject was himself. Rocket's worries had been eased after a frank talk between them, so Gao Li didn't hide the surgery. If it goes well, only my strength, speed, and reactions will increase dramatically. Everything else should stay the same, Gao Li explained. In short, It'll be like getting a huge combat boost without transforming. That means I might not even need to transform to match an average Kamen Rider." He added, eyes bright, "I won't have to fear getting hurt before I can transform." He scripted the procedure, verified its safety, and lay on the treatment bed. This time the modifications were done with more advanced alien tech. Thanks to enhanced self-healing, Gao Li barely felt the minimally invasive operation and needed little rest before testing. The results astonished him. Punching force, 3,219 kilograms. Pulling force, 4,428 kilograms. Fully equipped bench press, 5,196 kilogram. Kicking power, 10,573. 100-meter sprint, 4.87 seconds. His physique had multiplied 7 or 8 times over. Gao Li was now a true superhuman, a Kamen Rider without needing to transform. He also discovered that his golden eye had merged into his rider kick, amplifying its effect dramatically. The amplification jumped from double to quadruple, with the power focused into a short, devastating burst, perfect for a finishing move. He named it the Golden Rider Kick. Rocket peered at the report with his mouth open. "My God, your numbers are even higher than my cosmic states." "That's insane," Gao Li laughed. "You can't compare them directly. Cosmic states is powerful because of its variety of astronomical switch abilities. Pure raw stats like punching and kicking power are a different kind of strength." Rocket didn't press it. After adventuring among the stars, he knew that transforming into cosmic states put him among the universe's top combatants, at least compared to most beings Rocket was aware of. Still, seeing Gao Li's untransformed strength made him a little green with envy. Gao Li had also found Earth's coordinates and offered to send Rocket back directly. Gao Li himself gazed out at the stars and at the system panel. The countdown had finished. The 1-year period had arrived, the temporal energy the system needed had accumulated, and Gao Li could return to the DC universe whenever he chose. "Then let's go back to Earth," he decided. "I have unfinished business." United States, Earth. 2 young men met on the street, one handsome and youthful, the other thin and steady. "Bucky, Duo called you too?" asked the handsome one. "Yes," Bucky answered, startled. "He called you?" Steve nodded. "Yeah, I wonder what he wants." For some time, Gao Li's clone, Duo, had been keeping to himself to conserve magical energy. Professional managers ran the Yggdrasil Foundation, so the founder could afford to withdraw. Bucky and Steve hadn't seen Duo in a while. When they opened the office door, Duo, who had just been recalled by Gao Li, brightened. "Steve, Bucky, long time no see." "It's been a while, 3 weeks maybe," Bucky offered, though Duo corrected himself internally that it had been longer. Duo cleared his throat. "Why don't we go out and get together? I know a nice bar." Bucky snorted. "A bar? You're happy after 1 drink. You won't enjoy it for long." "We can decide about dinner later," Duo said, then grew serious. "I called you here because I want to ask for your thoughts." He had Steve and Bucky sit down, steepled his fingers, and adopted a solemn expression that made them a little nervous. "You first, Steve," Duo said, looking at the thin young man. "Do you still want to join the army?" Steve blinked. "Join the army? I haven't wanted that for a long time." "You convinced me, Duo. I realized I couldn't be idealistic. Thinking I'd just sacrifice myself was selfish and would burden others. So I gave it up and started doing volunteer work instead." Duo nodded with quiet approval. "So you weren't set on the military life itself. You wanted to do good. Volunteering suits that goal. Is that right?" Steve nodded. "Yes, if possible, I don't want to kill anyone, but I also want to end the Nazis' cruelty and the suffering this war causes." "Very good." Gao Li turned to Bucky. "What about you? What do you think?" Bucky laughed. "I'm not as noble as Steve, but I agree with him in general. I wanted to join the army once, but I don't think that now. Duo." He balked, scratched his head. "You really made me see that making contributions in other ways can help more people than signing up to fight." At that, Bucky looked sheepish. "By the way, why are you grilling us like this? It feels like a loyalty test." "I'm doing a loyalty test," Gao Li said plainly. "I need to make sure before I entrust something important. I don't want it in the wrong hands." He opened a drawer, took out 2 boxes of jelly beans, and poured 2 from each onto the table. "On the left are 2 blue jelly beans. On the right, 2 red. Choose." Steve and Bucky exchanged puzzled looks. but their faces grew serious. If you pick a blue jelly bean, Gowley explained, it means you're content with your life now. Treat this conversation as if it never happened. Don't let it disturb your current path. He pointed first at the blue, then the red. If you pick a red jelly bean, your peaceful life will end. You may be reborn, or you may face things that later make you regret this choice. You must consider carefully. Very few people have the virtue to take the red, and I won't force anyone into danger. The choice is yours. Steve and Bucky looked troubled. You said there would be danger? It won't harm me, Gowley said with a slight smile. But if you choose the red jelly bean, you'll gain power and also invite more danger. Steve smiled and picked up a red jelly bean without hesitation. Do I really need to think about it? I'm not afraid of danger. If I get stronger, I can help more people. That's worth the risk. Bucky picked a red jelly bean too. I'll do the same. Bucky, Steve tried to dissuade him. You don't have to pick red just because I did. You're different from me, Bucky said. You could help people even without taking this risk. You brat, Bucky punched Steve, laughing. Who told you I'm copying you? I chose this of my own free will. Steve's face reddened. Oh, right, sorry. I was being selfish and assumed you were influenced by me. Bucky sighed, half exasperated. He couldn't bear the thought of Steve facing danger without him. Since you've both decided, Gowley put the Desire Driver and ID Core on the table. Congratulations. From today on, you are Kamen Riders. He cleared his throat, then set those aside and took out 2 belts from under the table. One was red leather, the other white. Both had windmill-like mechanisms at their centers. I call them Typhoon 1 and Typhoon 2. They come with full-body armor, light and compact. The armor won't boost raw strength like the G3X, but it's excellent defense against conventional weapons and is wind-powered. This time, I focused on defense rather than amplification, Gowley said. If you accept, I'll perform a transformation procedure that integrates advantageous traits from other creatures, giving you extraordinary physiques. Kamen Rider? Bucky asked. Why that name? Because you'll wear masks, Gowley explained. Even with full armor, your friends and family aren't bulletproof. To use this power, you must conceal your identities and act as masked heroes. Steve nodded. That makes sense. I don't want my friends and family to be put in danger. But what exactly is this transformation surgery? It's my unique method to grant superhuman strength, Gowley said. As I said, I won't give it to the wrong people. In the right hands, it helps the world. In the wrong hands, it would cause countless deaths. The procedure is a secret you must keep. Seeing his stern expression, Steve and Bucky both nodded solemnly. We'll keep your secret with our lives, Steve said. I'll take it to my grave, Bucky added. Gowley smiled and stood. You don't have to promise so grandly. Come with me. The transformation couldn't be rushed. Gowley needed detailed measurements and to tailor the procedure to each of them. While he prepared, he also went to the warehouse in Germany, the temporary base where Dr. Erskine was being kept. Using alien technology, it had been easy to move Erskine across the border quietly. Erskine, what do you want next? Gowley asked. I can arrange you an identity if you like. As long as you don't campaign for office or attract intelligence services, you should be fine. Erskine, his risky serum now exposed by Gowley, was oddly calm. I have no interest in elections, and I don't want trouble with intelligence agencies. I only want a quiet life, maybe teach occasionally. I'm tired of dealing with high-level officials. Fine, Gowley said. I'll arrange it. The Yggdrasil Foundation will cover your expenses. If you feel useful, you can join our research team. I'll think about it, Erskine said, stretching. Thank you, Leger Duo, but right now I want nothing more than a quiet cup of coffee. After settling Erskine, Gowley devoted himself to Steve and Bucky's procedure. Far away at Kamartaj, a bald monk suspended in meditation floated down and opened his eyes. It has appeared again, the source that caused those drastic timeline changes months ago. The monk was the ancient one of this era. As Sorcerer Supreme, she had extended her life by borrowing power from darker dimensions and by being immensely powerful herself. Her mastery let her see many branches of the future, but even she could not continuously monitor every timeline fluctuation across the cosmos. The universe holds countless civilizations, many with far larger populations than Earth, and indiscriminate observation risked glimpsing entities best left unseen. So until now, she had not found Gao Li. Gao Li was adept at blurring his temporal trace. When he first arrived, he slipped past her notice. Even the formation of the Yggdrasil Foundation didn't make much of a ripple. But when Gao Li joined Hydra, betrayed them, and then took the Space Stone, the timeline shuddered, enough for the Ancient One to feel it. She cast seals, and the eye of Agamotto flared, searching. Gao Li's presence was like mist across the river of time, but taking the Space Stone had been a massive disturbance that let her narrow it down. United States, New York. The Ancient One landed and drew a circle in the air. She couldn't see everything yet, but she would find the origin soon. Back in Brooklyn, inside the secret lab, Gao Li finished his final checks as Steve and Bucky lay on the operating tables. Are you both sure? Once transformed, it's hard to go back. You've asked that a lot, Steve said dryly. My answer's the same. Bucky hesitated. Are there any hidden risks you haven't mentioned? No, Gao Li said. All original bodily functions remain and are even enhanced. Muscle mass increases, but your appearance otherwise won't change dramatically. Well then, what are we waiting for? Sounds like all upside to me. Steve grinned. Gao Li initiated the automated sequence. Like his own transformation, the procedure was handled by machinery, precise, fast, and without side effects. When Steve and Bucky stepped down, they were both noticeably more muscular. Bucky had always been well built. The change was subtle. Steve, by contrast, looked like a different man. Bigger, stronger, his frame transformed. So we're Kamen Riders now? Steve murmured, touching his muscles as if waking from a dream. In a sense, Gao Li said. Whether you become true Kamen Riders depends on your actions. I believe you can, and that's why I gave you this chance. You'll be the first and second Kamen Riders on Earth besides me. He held out 2 typhoon belts and 2 red scarves, presenting them with a small ceremony. I name you Kamen Rider 1 and Kamen Rider 2. Don't disappoint the title. Bucky tilted his head. So you performed the transformation on yourself too. Why aren't you Kamen Rider 1? Gao Li said, because I'm the origin of Kamen Rider, I can be called Kamen Rider 0, not number 1. This title still sounds a little odd to me. He rubbed his chin, then quickly stopped mulling it over. After all, he wasn't just a pure Showa-era Kamen Rider. He'd become Kamen Rider G3X, Faiz, Fours, Wizard, Kabuto, and Getak too. He was collecting Kamen Rider power bit by bit. By the way, how do I use this Typhoon belt? I don't see any buttons. Steve put on the Typhoon belt and tied the red scarf around his neck, turning it over and over with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Gao Li helped Bucky strap his belt on as well, then stepped back and demonstrated. To avoid accidental activation, the Typhoon belt needs both a voice command and a physical action to work. And the voice command, needless to say, is transform. As for the action, watch me. Gao Li struck the classic transformation poses of Kamen Rider number 1 and Kamen Rider number 2, simple, familiar movements that the others could imitate. There's also an AI safety system built in, he added. If the belt detects a true emergency, it can dispense with the action and respond to the voice command alone. Bucky couldn't help but jab back. That AI, didn't you say it's artificial intelligence? If the AI can decide it's an emergency, why can't it stop accidental activations too? Why do we have to do the pose? I don't care. Gao Li stiffened. Transformation poses are the romance of Kamen Rider. Besides, the emergency override is there if things are bad. If there's no danger, you do the pose. Otherwise, it loses its flavor. And the suit is only an accessory anyway, he continued, waving a hand. Your power comes from inside you. You'd be strong even without transforming, unlike other riders who are just ordinary people until they use their belts. So what does it matter? Steve and Bucky exchanged looks. They didn't really get what Gao Li meant by romance, but they were grateful that he'd given them a chance to become stronger. They let him decide the details. Are there any other Kamen Riders besides the 3 of us? Steve asked. Is it okay to ask who they are? Gao Li smiled. My friend Rocket. You'll meet him later. Just as Steve and Bucky were about to ask more, Gao Li suddenly froze and raised a hand to stop them. You two go test your power stats first. I have something to take care of. We'll talk later. Steve and Bucky nodded. It sounded important, so they headed for the testing room together. Once they were gone, Gao Li couldn't contain his excitement. A new reward had arrived, an SSS rank draw. He'd been waiting ages for another SSS. Could becoming Kamen Rider number 1 and number 2 have tipped the scale? Gowli was elated, but on reflection he decided that alone probably wouldn't justify SSS. The bigger factor, he suspected, was the death of Supreme Evolution finally rippling through the universe. According to Rocket, Supreme Evolution had created countless civilizations. On many worlds he was worshipped as a god. The death of such a creator would send shockwaves across many planets. Combined with the changes to Captain America and the Winter Soldier, the impact could easily reach SSS level. Gowli activated the drawing machine. The bright mechanism whirred and spilled points of light into his mind. This SSS knowledge reward arrived differently than the lower tier ones. Instead of dry data he had to study, it poured directly into his head, the way the giant ferocious beast had once taught him soul techniques. It felt like an instant download. Countless technologies and blueprints were now at his command. "What is this? An archive of the Earth Peace Union's research," he gasped. Almost all of the TPC organization's scientific achievements from Ultraman Tiga's universe were fed into him. The Victory Hypergun, the Maxima Overdrive System, PDI communicators, Dunk shooter guns, Victory rifles, Victory Falcon 1 and 2, Texas cannons, WIN, jet systems, Victory Falcon EXJ, Sherlock cars, Delam cars, underground Pipa tanks, Dolphin 202, ArtDes. If he had the resources, he could even build a TPC Far East base. It was an absurdly grand tech package. Don't underestimate TPC technology, Gowli thought. The Victory Falcon's armaments could hurt kaiju-level foes. The Texas cannon had killed monsters like Gakuma Ah. The Maxima cannon was even more devastating. He imagined that even many famously tough heroes and villains would struggle to withstand a direct hit from a Maxima cannon. "This is amazing," Gowli breathed. "SSS really lives up to its name." When Steve and Bucky returned with their printed test reports, they were speechless. Their formerly human bodies now scored in the tons, levels they'd never dreamed of. Steve clasped Gowli's shoulders. "Thank you, Legiduo. I finally have the strength to fight those arrogant Nazi forces. I promise, I'll use this power to end the war as quickly as I can so the world doesn't have to suffer anymore." "Don't forget to transform first," Bucky added with a grin. "Concealing your identity is important. If the military sees us like this, we'll have no end of trouble." Gowli accepted their thanks, but he felt oddly off-kilter, as if he'd become Ultra 7 or some other iconic protector. "Actually, there's something I wanted to tell you too. My real name isn't." Before he could finish, the air inside the lab warped. Space stretched and twisted, folding outward into geometric planes. Gowli, Steve, and Bucky all tensed. The pattern was all too familiar, a mirror dimension, and it opened inside a lab. "Watch out!" Gowli shouted. "He's here!" The Ancient One stepped through without invitation. A ring of fire bloomed, and she emerged, and Gowli's stomach dropped. She was a figure who seemed to cross eras like a ghost. "It really is you. How can you be everywhere? You're like a persistent ghost," Gowli blurted. The Ancient One's face tightened. A sudden headache stole over her. "Ugh, what is this?" she murmured, clutching her temples. Memories surged into her mind, an influx that left her reeling. The Eye of Agamotto allowed a Sorcerer Supreme to nudge her past and future selves, and this was a warning spell set by her future self. After the confrontation with Kamen Rider Kronos, Gowli's transformed modern identity, the future Ancient One had marked her own timeline with a spell. If any version of herself encountered Gori Parker, the warning would pour all the danger and related information into her head. "So that's it," she said once the flood subsided. Her voice turned icy. "Gori Parker, you've hidden yourself in this era." Steve and Bucky froze. Gowli answered quickly, "That's my real name. I was about to tell you." Bucky blinked. So who's this bald monk?" Bucky shrugged off the formalities. Names were names. The person underneath didn't change. He and Steve were ready to transform at the first sign of trouble. This was an emergency. The Ancient One fixed them with a cold stare. "This is none of your concern. You should not get involved," she explained, voice clipped. "The backbone of our timeline is made of absolute time points. If they're altered, the timeline collapses. Gori Parker can manipulate absolute time points. That's a massive hidden danger." Bucky argued, "He's been living with us, and nothing's come undone. Isn't that exaggerated?" The Ancient One conceded, At the moment, the timeline remains intact. That's because he hasn't tampered with this era's absolute time points yet. What he's done so far fits within permissible alternate world variations. Our world isn't static, she continued. Different choices lead to different timelines, parallel worlds, a multiverse. But some changes are absolutely forbidden. Once a timeline starts to perish, even I may be powerless to save it. There would be no going back. Are you willing to risk that? As the longest-serving Sorcerer Supreme, she had been an observer of past, present, and future. Usually, different timelines were simply different branches, and that was tolerable. Gao Li's existence, though, looked like a ticking time bomb. There were precedents, parallel worlds that had exploded after absolute time points were altered. You could hope the bomb would never go off, but gambling with an entire world was not rational. Persuading Gao Li not to touch absolute time points would only leave the detonation in his hands. The threat would remain. The safer, more responsible option was obvious. We have only one sensible course, the Ancient One said, voice hard as stone. Disarm the bomb. This, Steve and Bucky hesitated. They wanted to believe Gao Li. If Gao Li had flatly told them the Ancient One was wrong, they would have trusted him without question. Instead, even Gao Li's words had echoed the Ancient One's, only he had added that he wasn't sure one way or the other. It should be fake, right? Steve asked, looking to Bucky. Bucky gave a grim little smile. I hope so. I really can't imagine Gao Li destroying the world. Be careful, Gao Li warned, but before he could act, it was already too late. No one had expected the Ancient One to choose this moment to strike. She had always given the impression of a remote, otherworldly master, not the kind to ambush, but both of her hands, hidden behind her back, had already breached the space around them. One hand touched Steve, the other touched Bucky. With the lightest contact, their souls were wrenched from their bodies, and their physical shells collapsed, utterly lifeless. Ancient One, what are you doing? Gao Li roared, and the wizard driver materialized at his waist. Gori Parker, I will not make the mistake of underestimating you again. I must make sure there are no accidents. Though they hesitated, I can't rule out that they might act out of friendship. Temporarily removing them from the field is the best option, the Ancient One said coolly. I have not severed the bond between their souls and bodies. They will recover on their own. Floating untethered, Steve and Bucky watched in horror. The Ancient One had just separated souls from bodies with a single move. If she could do that now, could she not have done it the moment the two sides had first met? Any defense, any armor, useless. The power was absolute. What about Gao Li? Steve thought, panic rising. How could Gao Li possibly stand against such a foe? Gao Li's voice was cold. Then you don't take me seriously enough. Now you will regret not dealing with me the moment you could have. Transform. A column of magic, clear and crystalline like a launched diamond, shot into the sky as an incantation rolled through the mirror dimension. Unlimitedness. Grant me your power. Gold, wood, water, fire, earth, all-encompassing Yinglong. The Ancient One's eyes registered genuine surprise. She had not expected Gao Li, the scientist, to answer with sorcery. In truth, she had not intended to knock out Gao Li's soul earlier. The sudden unease had stopped her. Something about Gao Li's magic felt profoundly different. Gao Li was now steeped in a vast and strange power, this infinite magic, and that magic, rooted in his soul, made the usual soul extraction techniques ineffective. The Ancient One realized, with a chill, why she had felt compelled to hold back. Gori Parker, she said slowly, facing him as he moved into Kamen Rider wizard endless style. I don't know how you learned to wield sorcery, but your greatest mistake is abandoning the science that serves you best and trying to meet the Sorcerer Supreme on her own terms. Gao Li sneered. Is that so? Try me. The Ancient One stopped arguing and struck. Her hands wove impossible gestures, and a cascade of arcane force hammered toward Gao Li. The laboratory in the mirror dimension shattered as explosions rolled outward. Ancient incantations spread like choir songs through the city. Buildings trembled, skyscrapers swayed, rivers rose and boiled, and even the stars seemed to burn brighter in response to her presence. A blinding beam, a meteor of pure sorcery, cut through the night, aimed straight at Gao Li. It was unimaginably destructive. Brooklyn itself seemed doomed. Streets cleaved open, towers broke into rubble, fires and electrical storms lit the sky like a furnace. Gao Li, Steve and Bucky cried from their disembodied vantage, helpless as they watched the torrent of destruction engulf him. The Sorcerer Supreme's power was vaster than they had expected. Every motion of hers reshaped the land. She had no intention of letting up. "I will leave not a single particle alive," she declared. The city shuddered as stellar energies and elemental forces converged. The sky blossomed with enormous magic circles. From them poured colossal elemental bolts that collided with titanic detonations. Star-like projectiles rained down, tearing air and matter asunder. The night brightened to day as the destructive onslaught swept across New York. Ancient One kept weaving spell after spell, surrounding the city with supergiant magic seals and subjecting it to repeated, combined assaults. Anything within the area could not survive. The impact was cataclysmic. Half the sky flamed red as if the firmament itself had been struck. When the Ancient One finally paused, panting, the mirror dimensions New York had been scorched and riven to ruin. The mirror dimensions enlarged reality, so the city there was far larger than the real New York. Yet even so, under her full power, it had been erased. Steve and Bucky trembled. This was no longer merely human power. "Gao Li, where is he?" Steve asked, voice thin. They had none of their body's agency and clung to only the faintest hope. Surely no one could have survived that. Fortunately, the Ancient One had spared the place where she herself stood. That was the only corner of the city left intact, and it was where Steve and Bucky's collapsed bodies lay. Otherwise, her bombardment would have vaporized them too. That small mercy did little to brighten their hearts. Gao Li was her target. If I hadn't turned into Kronos before and had game items to bog you down in a power struggle, Kronos would still fall short of you in destructive power alone, a voice called from within the ruins. Ancient One's pupils contracted. Gao Li stood amid the magma and wreckage like a figure in hell, clapping slowly. He looked unscathed and composed. "How is that possible?" she muttered. Her attack had reshaped mountains and seas, a full-scale annihilation, yet Gao Li showed no sign of damage. His voice was steady, his tone untroubled. Steve and Bucky, hovering as their souls, were stunned and elated. Not only had Gao Li survived, he had done so without seeming to be scratched. The planet-shattering strikes had looked like a gentle breeze against him. "Do you have any other tricks? Show me," Gao Li said coolly, as if testing a pupil. "Let me teach you who truly overestimated themselves." 92. Regarding the Ancient One, Explanation, Part 1. Since there have been many questions about the Ancient One, I'll explain here. Author's note: because notes over 1,000 words are charged, I've split this into two parts. 1. Which version of the Ancient One is this? Answer: when writing Marvel fan fiction, outside of X-Men storylines, I generally assume the Marvel Cinematic Universe as the baseline, the image most readers associate with the character, while adding some elements from the comics where useful. For example, when a fan fiction introduces Tony Stark, most readers picture Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal. Very few authors explicitly state which alternate universe version they're using at the start. So this story mostly follows the MCU Ancient One, with a few comic-inspired adjustments. Number 2. Do absolute points in time exist? Answer: from the Ancient One's perspective, yes. The concept comes from Marvel's series What If. In that series, the Ancient One believes that altering an absolute point in time will cause the universe to collapse. Doctor Strange's actions there did indeed trigger universe-level destruction. The Watcher's perspective and narration in that show also acknowledge absolute points in time, so it isn't something I invented to make the Ancient One appear harsh. Using original settings from the source material is normal in fan fiction. If you dislike the idea of absolute points in time, that's a Marvel canon issue. US comics are full of contradictory or confusing rules. 3. Would the Ancient One really be willing to kill over absolute points in time? Answer: yes. In What If, when the Ancient One couldn't persuade Doctor Strange to stand down, she attacked decisively. The magic she used was powerful enough to kill. She did not rely solely on binding spells. If she intended only to restrain him, why use such destructive force? If the Ancient One believes that altering absolute points threatens the entire universe and that even the Time Stone can't undo that destruction, then as Sorcerer Supreme, it's her duty to act. The Sorcerer Supreme is responsible for removing threats to humanity, even if it means taking lethal action. It's not fair to expect her to sit by and do nothing. 93. Regarding the Ancient One, Explanation, Part 2. 4. Shouldn't the Ancient One be calm and spiritually disciplined? Section 69A. For matters that don't hinge on absolute points in time, the Ancient One truly remained indifferent and did not interfere. For example, Gori Parker has existed in the Marvel Universe for many years, and the Ancient One never stepped in until an absolute time point issue arose. The Ancient One also didn't take part in changes during World War II. But when it comes to critical moments, absolute time points, he is not a blank slate. He cares deeply. The Ancient One is human, older, more detached about his own life and death, but not an emotionless automaton. Like the analogy in the text, faced with a ticking bomb about to destroy his home, the Ancient One tried every method he could to disarm it. If he showed no anxiety or agitation in such a situation, then he would be more machine than man. Consider the Ancient One who attacked Doctor Strange in What If, and the Ancient One who first took Strange in was his inner life identical at both times. The Ancient One could not have decided to kill Strange without any internal upheaval. 5. The Ancient One's power. A. As noted earlier, the Ancient One in this story primarily references the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The MCU's Ancient One is not overwhelmingly powerful. Much of his prestige is built on imagination. In this book, the Ancient One has received an epic boost. The movie Ancient One could not destroy New York in a few moves. The one here operates on a higher scale. 6. Is the Ancient One weaker than Kang? A. Based on their official roles in the films, yes. Kang is the final big boss of an entire phase, while the Ancient One is a mentor character in a single film. Kang's TVA holds a large number of Infinity Stones, while the Ancient One guards only the Time Stone of a single universe. In Marvel's official hierarchy, Kang ranks above the Ancient One. Chapter 94. The Crushing Power of Endless Style. Although the Ancient One did not answer aloud, his grim expression said it all. He had never imagined Gori Parker would be this formidable. He had been powerful before, but now he proved even harder to defeat. Still, he refused to believe it. There is no truly invincible power in this world. You cannot take no damage at all. The Ancient One's eyes darkened. He rose into the air, mysterious runes shimmering around him. He formed a hand seal, and a streak of lightning ripped through the night sky, descending toward the ruined city. Rumble. In an instant, the lightning multiplied, coalescing into a flying serpentine dragon that lunged at Gao Li. Gao Li didn't dodge. He merely smiled faintly and met the lightning dragon head-on. Boom! The explosion shattered the ruin's silence, as if heaven and earth itself trembled. Brilliant lightning and flying arcs surged like a storm of 1,000 steeds, yet Gao Li stood at the center, perfectly still. This is impossible. The Ancient One, disbelieving, poured more magic into the attack. The destructive power must not be enough yet. Determined, he concentrated all his will into the lightning. The bolts incinerated whatever remained of the sinkhole's ruins. For a moment, the Ancient One seemed a god towering above the world, wielding ultimate destructive power. How unpleasant, Sorcerer Supreme, Gao Li said at last. He gathered magic in his hands and lightly clapped toward the lightning column. With a crisp snap, the lightning that had illuminated the entire New York sinkhole vanished. What? The Ancient One stared, stunned, his mind blank. He erased magic, so Gao Li had taken no damage because he could cancel magic itself? How could such an absurd ability exist, an existential bane for any mage? The Ancient One, long-lived and mentally steady, recovered quickly from the shock. No wonder you were so confident. The Ancient One formed a circle of flame, preparing another assault. Gao Li wouldn't give him another opening. Almost at once, a glow lit beside Gao Li, and a hand slid through space to slap the fire circle aside, dispelling it on contact. The Ancient One, seasoned in combat, leapt dozens of meters back to guard against pursuit, but Gao Li stood calmly. You don't think I only have strong defenses, do you? Gao Li chuckled. Now that even the most convenient space magics have been deciphered by me, how do you like that? The Ancient One inhaled slowly. Gori Parker, I must admit, you are the most formidable opponent I have ever faced. That said, there is a counter. You seem completely immune to magic's damage. But what about secondary effects caused by magic? Gao Li raised an eyebrow. He had to concede the Ancient One was old and experienced. Decades of fighting dimension gods had sharpened his insight. He saw the essence quickly and found a way to respond. But Gao Li's mastery of magic matched the Ancient One's own in many ways. Want to see? Gao Li said. Fine, I'll attack. Experience the answer firsthand. Endless style didn't just mean using the endless mage ring. Gao Li could still call on all his past night magics. The Ancient One braced himself, having already decided Gao Li was the greatest enemy of his life. Gao Li struck, his body a blur of motion, channeling fiery, gale-torn sorcery. With a deafening roar, a scorching fire drake formed in the sky. It opened its vast jaws and spewed an inferno, aiming to swallow the Ancient One. Rise, the Ancient One commanded. He called upon the Earth's energy. The sinkhole's ground split, and a solid rock barrier shot up, blocking the dragon's flames. He would not stay on the defensive. He controlled the rock and hurled massive stones at Gao Li. These were raw physical projectiles, not condensed magic. The Ancient One was betting that Gao Li couldn't render himself immune to pure matter. The stones cut through the air like meteors, trailing sparks. Gao Li calmly formed a water ring and a barrier ring. Azure ripples flowed from his hands, slowing and diverting the boulders with the momentum of water. Indeed, he murmured. The Ancient One brightened. He pointed at Gao Li and caused the earth underneath to surge, sending a tidal wave of rock sweeping toward him. Do you know what it's like to be helpless against me? Gao Li snorted coldly and transformed into a beam of light that pierced right through the rock wave. His hand blade, crackling with electric light, and slashed toward the Ancient One. Magic defenses would do him no good. The Ancient One used substitution magic to turn the body into butterflies when pierced, reappearing on the other side. The air around him boiled into a furious storm. Not a spell cast directly as damage, but a natural hurricane guided by his magic. Lightning and thunder braided inside the vortex. Gao Li, sword raised, cut through the storm and drove the lingering energy into a strike that shattered Ancient One's hastily formed magic circle. The impact hurled him back. He spat blood. Damn, he can attack me with magic directly, while I have to laboriously induce natural phenomena with magic. That's an enormous disadvantage. Wiping blood from his mouth, the Ancient One rose, shaking. The situation was clear. Although Gao Li's magic output wasn't flashy, it was more potent than the secondary, indirect effects the Ancient One could create. If the Ancient One couldn't strike directly with magic, it would be difficult to outmatch Gao Li. The imbalance left him in clear peril. I must use the ultimate means. Moonlight spilled around him as the Ancient One's face hardened. His monk's robe fluttered, the bronze pendant at his throat catching the light. He can't possibly be immune to the power of the Time Stone, can he? Barely dodging Gao Li's next pursuit, the Ancient One formed a seal with both hands. The Eye of Agamotto opened. The Time Stone inside shone like a fallen star. The night hush thickened. Time stopped. Steve and Bucky in their soul forms froze where they stood. The Ancient One exhaled, his eyes on Gao Li tinged with a rare worry. Please, let the stone stop him. If even the Time Stone failed, he truly wouldn't know what to do. Gao Li did indeed slow to a halt. The Ancient One relaxed and began to chant an ancient forbidden incantation. With Gao Li fixed, he intended to unleash a chain secondary attack and annihilate him. Magic surged as the Ancient One's voice rang through the temporal barrier, probing the depths of the universe. Then the Ancient One's pupils snapped narrow. No, this can't be. In his vision, Gao Li began to move, very slowly. He hadn't been completely stopped. He'd been slowed so much the Ancient One had the illusion of total immobilization. How is this possible? This shouldn't be happening. After a heartbeat's shock, the Ancient One's decades of mental cultivation brought him back to calm. A terrible realization formed. Gao Li was not simply immune to the Time Stone. The Ancient One didn't use the raw stone directly. Its power was channeled through the Eye of Agamotto, which meant he was employing time magic. Gao Li could nullify the magical component of any effect. The Time Stone's pure temporal power still affected him, so his movements were slowed to a crawl, but the magical part was stripped away. In other words, the Time Stone worked, but because it was mixed with magic, Gao Li could resist much of it. Only the residual, non-magical temporal slowdown remained. Calm down, the Ancient One told himself. Even if he moves at a crawl, it's no different from having time stopped. He hadn't finished that thought before Gao Li, moving with agonizing slowness, reached for the wizard driver at his waist. He intended to place the Endless Mage ring on it. Endlessness. Gao Li intoned a majestic chant and used the basic ability of Endless Style, adjusting his own time flow. The time stone had slowed him, but he accelerated his personal time. The slowdown imposed by the stone and his self-acceleration canceled each other out. Gao Li didn't become a blur of super speed. He simply restored his motions to normal speed. Ancient One, he said at ordinary pace, what other tricks have you got? You're out of options, aren't you? To the Ancient One, those words were the hiss of a demon from the abyss, plunging him into an ice cave of dread. His self-control and emotional restraint were legendary, but that did not make him immune to shock. Exhausted of every method and still unable to affect Gao Li, the Ancient One felt a feeling that decades fighting dimension gods had never produced in him. Despair. Section 70. It's over. Accept your fate. Gori Parker reached out and watched Ancient One's figure blur and fade. Gori Parker, you are stronger now, but what if it's not now? She murmured, and then she was gone. Ancient One was still Ancient One, a top-tier sorcerer, feared by many dimension gods and impossible to fully contain. After the initial shock, her long experience with demons and paradoxes sparked a last desperate plan. Gao Li's complete immunity to sorcery was the perfect counter to a sorcerer, but what if she used magic on herself? If the spell affected only her and didn't radiate outward, it might bypass his immunity entirely. If she could cast a spell on her own timeline self, send herself to a past where Gao Li hadn't transformed, she could ambush and eliminate him once and for all. It was a ruthless idea, but she had no better option. Now she only had to choose the right point in time. Standing on the river of time, searching the currents with the eye of Agamotto, she could not see Gao Li's exact form across the stream, but she could sense danger levels. The farther back she looked, the greater the danger felt. Back then, Gao Li still had the magical reserves to become Kamen Rider Wizard Endless Style more than once. Between the most dangerous points and the less dangerous ones, there was a gap where Gao Li's trace vanished entirely. He had been off in the broader universe, beyond her sight. Only when he returned to Earth, to the Sorcerer Supreme's base, did her perception sharpen. She had to pick a moment just before the recent great battle. That was the only viable window. Ancient One dove into the timeline. If she could hide and wait for the right instant, she could ambush a version of Gao Li who had not yet transformed. Soon she found him, a young man in a queen's coffee shop, sipping a cup and looking ordinary. No armor, no ring yet condensed. Good opportunity. Her first attempt was subtle. A direct, high-damage spell would create magical signatures that might be detected by a sorcerer like him, but striking the soul could be clean. She cloaked herself with near-silent disguising charms and slipped behind him. With a practiced motion she struck, aiming for the spirit itself. A crash of glass, a body launched through the shop window onto the street. Ancient One emerged, surprised. The magic she'd struck had triggered something automatic, an inner defense. Gao Li stood up unscathed and condensed the endless sorcerer ring on his finger. It isn't that easy, Ancient One thought. At least this is only the first try. She had no desire for a straight fight. She couldn't win in open combat. But she did have the eye of Agamotto and the freedom to traverse time. If one attempt failed, she could try again and again until one worked. She slipped through the timeline, appearing minutes earlier on the sidewalk. This time, she tried to target his physical body. She cast a fragile remote charm, and unaccountably a truck on the road suddenly careened out of control, slamming toward the cafe. Screams rose. The truck seemed aimed straight at Gao Li. It hit him. But then, impossibly, the truck decelerated almost instantly and stopped after only sliding a few meters. Ancient One stepped through a spatial fire circle to examine. There was a huge dent in the truck's hood. At its center, a handprint, Gao Li's hand. He had actually stopped the runaway truck with his bare strength. He's changed after that first battle, she muttered. Not only is he a sorcery-immune adversary now, his physical attributes have improved drastically. Gao Li, bewildered, wiped his hand and frowned. It felt like it was heading straight for me. Ancient One didn't wait for him to notice her. She formed the time-sealing hand signs and slipped away. Both attempts had failed. His soul and his body were effectively invulnerable. Magic attacks were likely nullified on contact. What next? Perhaps, she thought, human means would work. Technology, the sort of sniper rifle a marksman would use. No body, however tough, should withstand an anti-material round to the skull. If that failed, she could plant explosives in advance. With the eye, with the river of time, she had countless chances to restart. There were many ways to kill a man if you had infinite tries. She prepared to dive back into the stream of time for a third attempt. Then a bright, brutal beam lanced out of nowhere. The attack was so sudden that even Ancient One had no time to evade. The energy struck her right arm and dissolved it. Pain flared, but a deeper shock followed. Someone on the timeline had been sniping her. A second shot was already forming. Ancient One had no choice but to plunge into the river of time in haste, abandoning stealth. She collapsed onto the street, bloodied and stunned, drawing a crowd. "Are you all right? Do you need an ambulance? Police? Somebody call." Hands reached, voices asked, but Ancient One pushed them away. With spatial magic, she tried to get to safety. It was no place to linger. Yet it was too late. Someone in the cafe had seen her. Ancient One. Gowli had noticed her fall. He rose, condensed the endless sorcerer ring in the wizard driver. "Transform," he called. "Unlimited, please. Gold, wood, water, fire, earth, all-encompassing Yinglong." A column of diamond-bright magic shot into the sky as the crowd gasped. In moments, Gowli became Kamen Rider Wizard Endless style. Ancient One, gasping for breath on the pavement, watched him and managed a wry smile. She could no longer safely poke her head into the timeline. The mysterious sniper had an almost instantaneous reaction time and would kill her the moment she exposed herself. She needed another approach. She had felt the pattern on the river of time. At his least dangerous point, Gowli could probably transform into the magic-immune form only once. Otherwise, the danger level further back would be even higher. If she could find a way to force his earlier self to use up that transformation, his later self would be unable to become that form again. She couldn't safely travel into the past herself any longer, but information could still move. Memories and intangible data could be transmitted without the physical exposure that a fleshly presence required. And no sniper, no matter how powerful, could shoot a piece of information. While battling Gao Li on the street, Ancient One reached out across the timelines and connected to her modern self. The Ancient One, sitting in Kamartaj in another point of the River of Time. "This is," the present Ancient One whispered. In Kamartaj, the modern Ancient One was going about her calm ritual when a sudden pain erupted in her right arm. She looked down and recoiled in shock as her arm was no longer there. 71, Section 71. At the same time, a flickering memory surfaced in Guyi's mind. It was marked "in progress" because it was in an odd state. It belonged to modern Guyi's recollections, but when Guyi watched it, it felt like a live broadcast. She couldn't see anything beyond the present frame. "My history is being rewritten in real time. That's why this is happening," Guyi thought. Is Gori Parker involved? Even when he wasn't especially powerful, Gori Parker seemed able to alter fixed points in time, apparently by changing past reality itself rather than spawning parallel timelines. Then a communication from the Ancient One connected. One terse instruction: go to the era when I once fought Gori Parker and kill him after he has already lost his endless style. Modern Guyi and the Ancient One had once been the same person, and the new memory made the logic clear. If the Ancient One consumed Gowli's transformation in the past would ripple forward in real time, and Gowli would no longer be able to take that troublesome form in the present. "But what about you?" Guyi replied. "If you're killed in the past, that will affect me too. A time paradox could erase me." There was a pause, as if the Ancient One were fighting a hard battle just to answer. "It's okay. I can't beat him outright, but I can escape. I'll find a chance to flee later, so his transformation becomes useless." "It's possible," Guyi said, frowning. "But if I slip across the timeline, according to the memory, isn't there a sniper aiming at me?" "That sniper is probably targeting me in that timeline," the Ancient One answered quickly. The river of time is vast. No one can cover all temporal points at once. He won't spot you. Guyi mulled it over and found the reasoning sound. He formed the hand seal for time magic with one hand. Under the green glow of the Eye of Agamotto, the Ancient One prepared and cautiously entered the timeline. As expected, Guyi didn't encounter any snipers, yet waiting longer risked the Ancient One being detected. So he moved quickly to the temporal point he needed and slipped in. Mirror Dimension, New York Sinkhole. Gao Li stared at the spot where the Ancient One had vanished, brows knitted. The instant she disappeared, a fresh memory pushed into his mind. Gao Li remembered sitting in a cafe drinking coffee when someone unexpectedly tapped his shoulder, and then infinite magic erupted. Had the Ancient One made a move on him? He barely had time to think when another new memory overlaid it. The same day in the cafe, a serious traffic accident suddenly occurred. A runaway truck careened toward him, but Gao Li's body, already comparable to a Kamen Rider and statistically stronger than many, stopped the truck with his bare hands. Now, remembering it, that accident felt suspicious, maybe also an intervention by the Ancient One. No. Gao Li shook his head. I never had this memory before, and now it's appearing. The timings are overlapping. Then a third memory, seemingly simultaneous, popped in and stunned him. In it, after setting down his coffee, he saw a commotion across the street. Gao Li, never one to miss a spectacle, looked and saw the Ancient One. To stop whatever trick she might use, he transformed decisively into Kamen Rider Wizard and launched into a fierce battle with her. But the memory stopped before the outcome. The conclusion hadn't been recorded yet. The contradiction left Gao Li dizzy, so much so that it took him a moment to notice something else. I'm rubbing my brow? He looked at his hands in astonishment. Human palms. No endless style armor. Where was his endless style transformation? Right then, the realization hit. His history was being overwritten, changing his present self and stripping him of the Kamen Rider Wizard endless style. Exactly, a cold voice said from above, the Ancient One from the modern timeline, having crossed time to join the battlefield. Seeing Gao Li already in human form, she nodded with satisfaction. In that condition, he was like a turtle in a jar. Gao Li stared at her and, to her dismay, laughed. What are you laughing at? Seeing you gave me an idea, he said calmly. You and the Ancient One I fought aren't from the same temporal point, are you? If she can connect past and future to fight, why can't I? As he spoke, Gao Li buckled a new device to his left hand and raised his right arm high. Today's supposed to be my day of death? Maybe not. As long as I don't die today, my idea can still become reality in the future. You! The Ancient One reacted instinctively and unleashed a magic strike, but two mechanical beetles intercepted it midair. A red beetle flew to the belt, a silver beetle landed in Gao Li's hand. Now I've even grasped tomorrow. Transform! Gao Li hadn't been lying. His inspiration had come from the Ancient One's own ability to bridge times. There was no reason he couldn't leverage the same concept. He had confidence born from having obtained and developed the tachyon-based Kamen Rider system that produced Kamen Rider Kabuto. He believed his talent would someday produce the system's pinnacle, the Beyond Zector. And once that idea existed, the future would bend toward it. The Beyond Zector would exert its power across time and come to him. He was betting on his future self, and, this time, he won. A tangible artifact, the Beyond Zector, was in his hand. He snapped it onto his side buckle. Hyper cast off. He pressed the beetle horn on the Beyond Zector, and the armor that now scattered around him reformed into an all-encompassing assault, interrupting the Ancient One's pursuit. Change. Hyper Beetle. Gao Li's transformation into Kamen Rider Kabuto altered him drastically. His chest, back, shoulders, and limbs expanded with new armor as superluminal particles spilled out like aurora. Kamen Rider Kabuto, Hyperform. What is this? The Ancient One's lips trembled, her usually unflappable calm showing cracks. No matter her schemes, Gao Li kept finding odd counters. Calm down, she told herself. The priority was still to kill Gao Li, who was now vulnerable to magic. She breathed deeply and forced herself to refocus. No matter what new rider he becomes, my objective is unchanged. On the battlefield, Steve and Bucky were floored. Their souls had returned to their bodies after a while, but they were helpless. The situation was beyond comprehension. The Ancient One vanished, Gao Li transformed, another Ancient One appeared. Gao Li changed again into a rider they had never seen. What on earth was happening? Even without understanding the mechanics, they could see Gao Li's hyperform was primed. Hyperform normally didn't emit such enormous superluminal energy unless it intended to use a very high-power technique. He was preparing to fight at full strength. Hyperclock up. Gao Li tapped the Beyond Sector and instantly vanished from his spot. The Ancient One, after a second of stunned reaction, controlled the Eye of Agamotto and pursued him. Gao Li knew Hyperform didn't grant immunity to Time Stop, so he had to change the battlefield to deny her that opening. Hyperclock Up couldn't beat Time Stop, but it could transcend time and space, jumping freely into the past and future. He chose his destination clearly, the River of Time in the Marvel Universe. He wasn't scared that the Ancient One would follow. If she didn't, he could go to the past and try to eliminate her there. If she did follow, then his plan would force her hand. Once she arrived, his unavoidable gambit would unfold. Even the Time Stone couldn't freeze the River of Time itself, neutralizing the Ancient One's time-stop power. But there was a cost. Hyperclock Up could accelerate many times over normal clock up, yet it couldn't be used while already in the River of Time. Gao Li was leaping out of the timeline onto the River of Time itself. Being in Hyperclock Up already meant he couldn't activate Hyperclock Up again, so both he and the Ancient One effectively lost their greatest temporal tools. What remained would be a test of raw combat power. Come here. Punch Hopper, Kick Hopper, Drake, and the perfect Zector, 100 Insect Sword. Gao Li waved on the timeline, and the 100 Insect Sword, fitted with the three Zectors, Punch Hopper, Kick Hopper, and Drake, crossed time and space into his hand. His future self had indeed developed Zectors for Punch Hopper, Kick Hopper, and Drake, as well as the 100 Insect Sword. Their core technology was the same as that of Kamen Rider Kabuto and Kamen Rider Gattack, so the work was straightforward. Gori Parker, what trick are you playing? The Ancient One demanded. Sorcerer Supreme Gui arrived, her face carved into a hard line. Looking at you, haven't you already guessed? Gori smiled faintly. Of course. There's one more thing. If we start our fight here, I can use my power without restraint. I won't have to worry about causing excessive collateral damage. Gui's laugh was bitter. Excessive damage? After you watched me destroy a New York scaled up several times over, you still dare to speak of restraint? Coincidentally, I'm pretty good at that too. Gao Li removed the Kabuto Zector and set it against the 100 Insect Sword. Lightning flared along the blade like a war horn. Without another word, both of them struck at once, each unleashing everything at their command. Gui began a low incantation. Her eyes gleamed with starfire, a sunlit light that gathered into a terrible vortex. Runic sigils swirled with her words as vast magical circles took shape. Standing there with her eyes closed, she looked like a god, destruction and creation, answering only to her will. For a moment, her mind and her magic were one. She was no longer merely mortal, but the embodiment of spellcraft itself, a force that could annihilate worlds. Gao Li moved with equal resolve. He folded the 100 Insect Sword into the 100 Insect Spear and punched the four colored buttons on the perfect Zector in quick succession. Kabuto power, the Bee power, Drake power, Sassword power. 4 Zector symbols projected and spun around the spear's shaft. All Zector combine. Tachyons funneled into the muzzle like a gravity well. Light wings of energy unfurled behind Gao Li, and he aimed at Guyi. Maximum Hypercyclone. Guyi cut loose a torrent of destructive magic born to unmake things, an explosion of light like a nova. The two attacks met on the River of Time. Thunder rolled through the timeline as if the universe itself had taken a beating. The shockwave of their collisions spread outward, threatening to unmake everything it touched. When the aftershocks faded, they found themselves blown back into the mirror dimension's New York sinkhole. The blast had cast them out of the River of Time and back into the timeline. Only Gao Li stood unharmed. Guyi trembled, blood streaming uncontrollably from her 7 orifices. I actually lost, she whispered, disbelieving. Her hands came away wet with blood. She could not staunch the flow. Gao Li leveled the 100 Insect Spear at her. You're powerful. You did destroy a New York scaled up many times, but that was done by stacking 3 layers of magic. I'm not bad either. The maximum hypercyclone has a destructive radius of a full 100 kilometers. When I fire, the Beyond Sector goes into charge up and absorbs spatiotemporal super energy tachyons endlessly. Gao Li's meaning was clear. When he activated his ultimate, he turned into a short-term super cannon with effectively limitless energy. With infinite tachyons supplying it, anything inside that 100-kilometer cone could be utterly pierced. With a casual sweep, he could level mountains or obliterate a massive, magnified New York. Guyi's eyes widened. She snapped awake from her stupor and formed a quick hand seal. The eye of Agamotto glowed turquoise. She had returned to the timeline, and with it, she could cast time magic. But Gao Li had been counting on one thing. The Beyond Form and the 100-insect sword needed to cool down at the same moment for him to chain the next attack. Seeing Guyi move, he fired again without hesitation. Maximum Hypercyclone. A tornado-shaped wave of energy screamed toward Guyi. It struck with overwhelming force and detonated amid the sinkhole. Gao Li watched, expecting her body to be torn apart, only to see something else happen. Because Guyi was casting time magic, the first impact wasn't on her body at all, but on the time stone within the Eye of Agamotto she wore. Gao Li's face went white. No, could it be? When two completely different time systems collide violently, space-time itself can tear apart. Exactly that happened. A dark, black sphere rupture, like a miniature black hole, bloomed at the impact point. Guyi, closest to it, had no time to escape and was swallowed. Gao Li slammed his side buckle. Hyperclock up. He entered hyperclock up and pushed to accelerate away, but the rupture expanded like a gravitational wave at light speed. In the next instant, Gao Li was dragged in too, and a moment later the people a little further back, Steve and Bucky, were swallowed as well. Crack! The mirror dimension fractured. The New York sinkhole collapsed, and they were spat back into the laboratory in the real world. The lab stood empty. Outside, on the outskirts of modern-day New York, a rip in the sky opened above a forest and Gao Li fell out. Because Kabuto Beyond Form could ride tachyon streams, he'd been able to hold control during the spatial temporal purge and return to the real world under his own power. He scrambled to his feet and checked his bearings, not by a phone or a watch, but by the timeline perception granted to him by Beyond Form. It told him the exact moment. It was the same day as his first battle with Sorcerer Supreme Guyi and his trip to the DC Universe, more or less the same time period. He hadn't chosen his arrival point, but had landed here by coincidence or fate. Gao Li stroked his chin, thinking. Guyi had told him she'd only found Kamen Rider tech in this timeline, implying he might be unique across the multiverse. Two Gao Lis could not coexist in the same space-time. He suspected the Beyond Sector had been sent from a future self. When he tapped into Beyond Power, it hadn't been a future Gao Li transforming to aid him, but the future Gao Li sending the Beyond Sector and the 100-insect sword through time. But where had Guyi gone? After giving those thoughts a moment, he hit his side buckle again and dove back onto the river of time. Hyperclock up! He rode the stream and scoured the timeline for Guyi. If she didn't show up soon, he thought, he might have to go back and finish her off himself. Instead, what he found froze him. He could see the end of her timeline, the point of death, and it wasn't far from where they'd been. It was almost the same day. Gao Li watched with the cold appraisal of someone who could read the flow of time. Guyi's endpoint showed up in Tampa, Florida. In the footage he observed, Guyi stumbled into view, coughing blood, her body ragged. She didn't seem to have chosen her landing place. She'd arrived there randomly. She made a hand gesture. The Eye of Agamotto opened, and for a stretch of what followed, the eye cast a shield of obscurity over her experiences. What happened next was hidden even from Gao Li. He fast-forwarded through the shield to where it ended. At dusk, Guyi leaned on a utility pole, exhausted, and the Eye of Agamotto was gone. Where had it gone? Had she been dealing with the eye during the shielded interval? Was she arranging things for her own death? Then space-time themselves shifted. The air around her nodded, and her body was ripped into another dimension. Figures materialized around her, towering and cruel, their voices dripping with amusement. Heh! Sorcerer Supreme. Isn't this the Sorcerer Supreme? Sorcerer Supreme Guyi. Is that you? You've come here? Ha ha ha! The mighty Sorcerer Supreme Guyi, reduced to such a pathetic state. They circled her, bodies brimming with onerous power and energy that burned like living fire. Gowli studied them through the river of time. Some had horns twisted from their skulls, others bore dark wings, some had faces split with fangs, and others wore hands tipped with razor talons. Section 73. They looked anything but human. Dimension gods, the Ancient One gasped. I knew you would come. The red-skinned demon sneered. You borrowed our power and never returned it. You should have expected this. Your soul, your flesh, use them to pay your debt. The green-faced, fanged demon laughed heartily. These dimension gods, whose power the Ancient One had taken and not given back, were creatures leaning toward the dark dimension. Devouring humans and absorbing souls was their habit. The winged demon smiled with cruel amusement. Ancient One, you shouldn't have provoked us. If you'd kept borrowing the dark dimension's power, you could have lived many more years. The Ancient One showed no fear. Her face was calm. My mission ended a little earlier than I'd hoped, but only by a few years. I only hope the future unfolds as planned. You're still thinking about a few years from now? Snarled the fanged demon, baring his claws. There is no Sorcerer Supreme on Earth now, is there? In other words, Earth is undefended. Do you really expect your pawns, the handful of disciples and lowly captains of Kamartaj, to stop us? The dimension gods erupted in scornful laughter. The current sorcerers of Kamartaj are powerless against us. The next Sorcerer Supreme hasn't even been born yet. It's not his time. The Ancient One's voice remained steady. I no longer need to worry about that. There's a Chinese saying, when the sky falls, someone will stand tall to hold it up. Aren't you curious why I'm so badly injured? Their laughter faltered. When they first found the Ancient One in a shockingly weakened state, they had rejoiced without thinking why she would be in such demand. Who could have beaten the Ancient One so badly? Slowly their mirth turned to unease. The Ancient One smiled faintly. You realize now, there must be a powerful person on Earth. I lost to him, which is why I am in this state. Even without me, he is not someone you can provoke. You couldn't beat me, and he who defeated me is 100 times worse. The Dimension Gods exchanged uncertain glances. The Ancient One was right. Earth might yet harbor someone strong enough to answer an invasion. Maybe that someone wasn't the Sorcerer Supreme and therefore had no duty to protect humanity, but an incursion would affect him, and he would act. If he could grievously wound the Ancient One, how much more terrifying would he be in full fury? How about we wait a bit longer? The red-skinned demon suggested tentatively. Fine, the green-faced demon agreed. Dormammu is preparing to invade in a few years. We'll watch how that goes and then decide. The others found the plan sensible and, for the moment, postponed invading Earth. They would let Dormammu act as the vanguard. Meanwhile, the Ancient One, now in their power, would be toyed with later. At that point, Gowli's view of the Ancient One's timeline snapped off. The records showed the Ancient One had died at the hands of the Dimension Gods. Gowli felt complicated. They had been enemies, locked in a life-or-death struggle, but the Ancient One had not lied. As Sorcerer Supreme, she was a guardian of humanity. Her detachment from her own death was something Gowli could not yet emulate. Perhaps she wanted him to see this ending. Through the events at the end of her timeline, she was telling him, before the new Sorcerer Supreme is born, it falls to you to protect humanity. Fortunately, the Ancient One had bluffed the Dimension Gods. For a few years at least, they would not invade Earth. Gowli needed no further proof about the Ancient One who had fought him in the past. The memories he had were happening in real time. The Ancient One had been fighting the past version of Gowli fiercely, throwing every spell she had, trying desperately to find a way to escape. If she could get away, there would be no temporal paradox with the modern Gu Yi. But in that instant, the Ancient One froze. She was the only Ancient One across the timeline who retained a supertemporal connection to the modern Gu Yi. Through that link, the Ancient One in the past could perceive modern Gu Yi's situation clearly. The Ancient Ones at other points in time were clouded by Gowli's mist and were unclear. Distracted by what she saw through the connection, the Ancient One failed to dodge an otherwise avoidable attack. The spell hit her squarely. She spat blood, bones shattering, as she was thrown into the street. The Gowli of that past moment was startled and puzzled by her sudden distraction. But instead of counterattacking, the Ancient One used the Eye of Agamotto. The Time Stone helped her slip into the river of time. For once, she suffered no further blows. So that's how it is. Sure enough. The Ancient One exhaled, a long, knowing sigh. Is this the last message your future self wanted to send me before her death? Her eyes were clear and cold, strangely tranquil. She felt the death of her future self, but showed no tremor. Gori Parker, it was you, from the future, who attacked me in the past. I suppose you used that transcendent form of yours. You're not attacking me anymore, because it's unnecessary now. There's no meaning in fighting. It's a pity I only realized this so late. She shook her head slightly, as if talking to herself. Her thoughts matched the dead modern Guyi's. Until the new Sorcerer Supreme is born, the guardian of humanity will temporarily be Gori. Faced with an invasion, humanity needs someone tall enough to hold the sky. It turned out Gori had grown far more than she had expected, and that growth reassured her most of all. Next, I should tidy up the mess I've made and clear a few things for the new guardian. The Ancient One re-entered the timeline, landing at the moment just before her battle with Gori. At that moment, Gori sat in a coffee shop, complaining about how bad the coffee tasted. This was the fourth time the Ancient One had come to the same hour, but this time she simply watched quietly and did nothing. Minutes passed. Gori paid, left, and went home. A new reality overlaid the old. The New York magic war that had once stunned the nation never happened. The badly wounded Ancient One let out a shaky breath and, unable to stay standing, slid down to sit against a wall. She looked toward Camartage and thought that somewhere in this era there still existed another version of her, an Ancient One who knew nothing for now. It's time for me to leave. She struggled up, activated the Eye of Agamotto, and returned to her own era. But she did not reappear in New York. She landed in Camartage. The future must remain the same, so Gori Parker can become as strong as he is now, so the new guardian may one day surpass me, she thought. She believed that if the Dimension Gods truly invaded, Gori would not stand aside. The reason she had tried to eliminate Gori earlier was not personal hatred, but the fear that he was a time bomb, someone who could alter fixed points in time. She planned to defuse that bomb by erasing him. Over the years, the modern Guyi's observations of Gori had been imprinted into this Ancient One's mind, letting her gauge his character more accurately. Her task was clear. Gori Parker, I know you can watch time itself, so you are watching, aren't you? She murmured, part confession, part challenge. Watch closely. I will shoulder the burden of the loser, accepting future death. But from now until then, Earth still needs my protection. She began to alter her memories of that day, making it appear as though she'd been grievously wounded in battle with the Dimension Gods. That way, once she recovered, the causal loop would hold. Gori watched the latter half of her revisions through the timeline, filled with emotion. When the Ancient One came into that period for the fourth time, he had wanted to speak to her. But when he tried, Hyperclock Up could not enter. That confirmed his suspicion. Two of him could not exist at the same point in time simultaneously. Sigh. With this settled, I'll go find Steve and Bucky. Gori had already traced the moment they were pulled away, but he hadn't been worried earlier. For someone who could move freely through time, there was no hurry to find them. He did learn one limitation. He could not enter a past or future where he already existed. If he avoided entering the timeline, it would be as if he did not exist within it, and he could go anywhere. He searched for Steve and Bucky all the way into the future, but found it shrouded in mist. My own talent for hiding the timeline is infuriating, he muttered. Though it had protected him from being spied on when he was weak, now that he could probe time, his mist affected even him. There was a silver lining. If Steve and Bucky's future was obscured by his mist, it meant they would meet him in the future. For now, he didn't need to enter the timeline. Then I'm going back to the DC universe first. If he trained and grew stronger there, he'd be better prepared for whatever came next. He needed to replenish his infinite magic, and the river of time he currently occupied was a safe place to leave his body. With that decided, Gori spoke with a deep voice. Crossover, activate. Chapter 98, Gaia Memory. Crossing back to the DC universe felt like plunging into deep water. As his vision cleared, Gao Li found himself waking inside a life support capsule at the Fadian group. I spent a little over a year in the Marvel Universe, and here, time passed. He glanced at the clock in the safe house. About 15 minutes, I guess? Not bad, not too long. He wondered if anything in the system had changed. Gao Li checked the system panel and was pleasantly surprised to see a new reward, an SSS rank lottery. An SSS? Ancient One really is a heavyweight. Her death must have had an enormous ripple, he muttered. Then he thought it over and it made sense. Ancient One had ties to multiple dimension gods and to changes in the future. An SSS ranking was reasonable. What he didn't know was that it wasn't just Doctor Strange's future that had been affected. The futures of the Avengers, who were supposed to borrow the Time Stone during Endgame, had been altered too. All of that together pushed the influence to SSS. Gao Li didn't waste time. He gave a half-hearted, joking prayer to God. After all, he was in the DC Universe now, and initiated the draw. When the golden SSS lottery machine finished, a knowledge-type memory poured into his mind. Gao Li savored it for a second and froze. Is this the SSS reward? Shouldn't this be S or SS? The new knowledge covered development data for the T2 Gaia memory, and even the double driver and lost driver. On the surface, these sounded like the basic standards for Kamen Rider W and would normally be S rank, but this wasn't ordinary memory data. It was the T2 version. T2 included manufacturing methods for forms like Ultimate and Eternity, powers on par with final forms, so it made sense that the classification was SSS. As he dug into the information, another problem presented itself. To manufacture a Gaia memory, you needed an Earth's well to extract planetary concepts. Where was his Earth's well? Did the DC Universe even have one? He didn't know. Gaia memory technology was highly sci-fi, arguably more speculative than astronomical switch tech, photonic blood, or tachyon applications, so Gao Li was intrigued regardless. He decided to start research immediately and headed for his secret Fadian group laboratory. At the lab, he ordered equipment and planned experiments. The original facilities were a bit sparse. New instruments would take time to arrive, and Gao Li was mentally exhausted after his time-spanning confrontation with the Sorcerer Supreme. He rested for a bit, then caught sight of a familiar piece of machinery in the corner. The Phantom Demon manufacturing machine moved over from Wayne Manor. That machine had been used once to make phantom demons for producing magic stones and then sealed. Gao Li had no intention of recreating a phantom demon race. He'd warned Zatanna and Constantine that phantom demons were born from despair and were inherently evil, but he paused when he remembered something else. He still had the raw material intended for phantom demon production, the god's power gifted by the giant, ferocious beast. That god's power had been inverted and condensed specifically to form phantom demons. Across the multiverse, there was no raw material more suitable. Curiosity won out. What would a phantom demon born from pure, inverted divine light look like? Gao Li rated risks realistically. He had the Lord of Magic's magic immunity characteristic, Endless Style, which could suppress phantom demons. Even the giant ferocious beast's power had been affected by that immunity, so a new phantom demon would likely be manageable. Besides, if an omniscient, omnipotent being in the DC universe had wanted the power reclaimed, Gao Li reasoned, it would already have been taken back. Convinced, he opened the phantom demon manufacturing machine, drew the god's power from his body, and injected it as raw material. Because he'd already imprinted his mark on the power, he could control it easily. To an outside observer, it looked like he was pouring a viscous, milky white energy into the machine. Then he pressed Start. Based on past experience, he expected birth in about 10 days and left it running. While new lab equipment arrived in trickles, Gao Li decided to take a night off. He'd just returned from the Marvel Universe after a world-shaking battle. He deserved sleep. He chuckled as Alfred's voice popped into his head, as if he'd been brainwashed by the old butler's demonic scolding. The next morning, refreshed, he checked the progress and nearly choked. 12 hours had produced only 0.01% progress. If this continued, it would take some 5,000 days to finish, over 13 years. He triple-checked his setup. Everything was correct. The only explanation was the god's power itself. Its energy level must be too high, he concluded. That high an energy density could be slowing the phantomization process. Rather than abandon it, he decided to put the time to use. If Gaia memory could extract concepts, maybe it could extract the concept of God's power. If that worked, Gaia memory's technological potential would be staggering. Gao Li immediately started researching and fabricating Gaia memories. When the Phantom Demon progress reached 0.3%, he produced his first blank Gaia memory. As the Lord of Magic who'd imprinted on this god's power, he had a unique advantage. He coaxed a fine white filament of energy out of the mass and channeled it into the blank Gaia memory. Everything hinged on that one attempt. The Gaia memory flashed white for half a second and then exploded into fragments across the lab floor. The energy filament escaped and flowed back to its body inside the Phantom Demon machine. Gao Li reviewed the monitoring data and grimaced. The god's power's energy level was simply too great, far beyond what a Gaia memory could handle. If he wasn't mistaken, it exceeded the anti-crisis energy the giant ferocious beast had once mentioned, one of the 7 creative forces of this universe. A being capable of mythic creation would naturally possess energy at least that potent. He let out a resigned breath and resolved to just let the god's power consume itself in the Phantom Demon Forge for now. Then he had another idea. If God's power was too intense for a Gaia memory, perhaps night magic, Kamen Rider level power, would be compatible. They were, after all, the same general system. He produced more blank Gaia memories and imported his night magic into one. The memory loaded successfully and acquired the concept of Kamen Rider Wizard Fire style. Gao Li smiled at the result, a little amused and strangely familiar. For a moment he thought of the legendary Rider memory toys Bandai sold, but he quickly shook the thought off and returned to work. The previous generation always tried to pinch my family's inventions, sometimes nicking the plastics, sometimes poaching the color schemes, damned if they didn't. Still, the birth of this Kamen Rider Wizard Gaia memory was huge for me. It meant that, aside from lending night magic directly, there was another way to let someone else transform. Of course, Gaia memories are picky about compatibility. If it's wrong, it can be useless. So there are limits. If someone were highly compatible with the Wizard Gaia memory, they'd essentially become a night magician outright, Gao Li mused, stroking his chin. Compared to lending powers directly, each approach had its trade-offs. At least now he had another option. He wrapped up a day in the lab and stretched. Harley came up with his phone in hand. "Boss, your friend Zatanna called this afternoon, but you said not to be disturbed." "Understood," Gao Li cut in. "Call her back for me." He dialed. Zatanna's voice answered right away, apologetic. "Gao Li, I'm so sorry." He blinked. "For what? What happened while I was in the Marvel Universe? No, actually in the DC Universe. Only 15 minutes passed there. Most of my time was spent on the driver." Zatanna hesitated, then blurted it out. "When I asked my father to teleport you back from hell, I let slip that I knew the Endless Lord." "You let slip?" Gao Li frowned. "I don't remember showing any great power in hell. When did I?" "Compared to the Spectre and Nabu, you already count as showing great power," Zatanna said in a rush. "That's how the magic world has taken it. The title Endless Lord has exploded across the magic world. Everyone knows it now." Gao Li felt a flush of pride, then checked himself. "Okay, enough bragging. Why are you apologizing?" Zatanna cringed. "I kept telling my father to keep it secret, but he got drunk and boasted. I have a lot of magic masters found out because of him. I gave him hell for it." Gao Li waved it off. "It's fine. I asked him to teleport me. I expected this might happen, but you should be careful. You might get targeted for knowing me." "Don't underestimate me," Zatanna said stoutly. "I'm close to the rank of a magic master. Ordinary people can't touch me." "That's settled," she continued, more nervously now. "Actually, it's not me looking for you. It's the magic masters you met before. They want me to contact you. They hope the Endless Lord will stand on their side in a coming event. Well, on humanity's side, not anyone else's." Gao Li frowned. "You're making it sound huge. What event are we talking about?" Zatanna took a breath. "You haven't had much to do with the magic world, so you probably haven't heard. It's the biggest thing in the magic world right now. When they learned the giant ferocious beast was about to revive, a prophecy surfaced from hell, carved on a stone tablet." She read the prophecy aloud. "After the winter solstice, nature and the supernatural will combine to bring forth a new holy sun, and that holy sun will be able to heal this land. At first, no one knew what heal this land meant, but now it looks like the holy sun can quell the elemental chaos the giant ferocious beast brings. Winter solstice? Gowley checked the calendar on his phone. Which winter solstice? December 25th, Roman calendar, Zatanna said bluntly. To put it bluntly, it's a prophecy about the birth of a contemporary Jesus. Gowley's stomach dropped a little. If the holy sun really referred to that, this was enormous. God is the top boss in the DC universe. Anything tied to a holy sun would carry immense weight. Gowley didn't yet know how three major events, Crisis on Infinite Earths, the Darkseid War, and the Holy Sun's advent, were intertwined, or that his own meddling in the 10,000 Sky Mirror had pushed the Darkseid War forward and thus hastened the Holy Sun's arrival. He kept his skepticism for now. All right, I see the gravity, but why do the Magic Masters care so much? Why do they want me to take a side? Zatanna hesitated. I can't explain everything in detail, but the short version is, the birth of the first Holy Sun, Jesus, represented heaven asserting authority over humanity. With a second coming, the magic world, led by Nabu, wants to make sure humanity retains agency, to steer the outcome so humans can have freedom. So the world is under heaven's rule? Gowley asked. I mean, heaven doesn't seem overwhelmingly present. There are other powerful religious factions. Zatanna shrugged. I don't fully understand the divine politics either. Maybe it's an ambition only a god king can grasp. I'm just the messenger. Gowley said he needed time to think. Offending heaven was no small matter, and he wasn't confident enough yet to pick fights with gods. Zatanna accepted that and ended the call, saying she had done what the Magic Masters asked. After hanging up, Gowley thought. His hesitation about offending heaven was half a pretext. The Magic Masters themselves were willing to interfere, which suggested heaven might be letting nature take its course in this Holy Sun event. If they weren't afraid of heaven here, why should he be? Still, he couldn't make a decision based only on one side, so he called someone else. Congratulations, big star. What made you look me up? I thought you were going to cut me off after last time, Constantine drawled. Gowley feigned ignorance. What big star? You, the Endless Lord, the giant ferocious beast mentioned. That name's shaking the magic world. Even Swamp Thing asked me to put in a good word with you. Gowley repeated what he'd heard from Zatanna and asked about Swamp Thing. Constantine explained that Swamp Thing had attacked earlier, accidentally, perhaps, but might later hold a grudge against someone powerful. Gowley reminded him the attack had been part of eliminating the evil witch group and that he wasn't likely to hold petty grudges. Constantine laughed it off. That's what you say. Big boys tend to make others overthink. Gowley steered the conversation back. Do you know about the prophecy of the Holy Sun's advent on the winter solstice? Of course, Constantine said. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. I've been planning for it, figured I might need your backup. But right now, I'm confident I can handle it. Gowley blinked. John, this involves heaven. Where do you get the confidence? Constantine grinned. Simple. Whatever else happens, the Holy Sun needs a mother. Even Jesus had Mary. I found the modern Holy Mother, Zede. She's my girlfriend. No Holy Mother, no Holy Sun. It's that basic. Gowley gaped. You can just prevent her from being the mother? Does heaven not care? Heaven's full of hypocrites, Constantine said. The Advent is essentially heaven trying to reassert control over humanity. The angels won't interfere directly since they want to save face. So this whole thing is, on the surface, a contest between humans, gods, and demons, each using their own avenues. Gowley asked. The prophecy came from a tablet dug out of hell, Constantine said. Hell knows what's coming, and they don't want another Holy Sun. They sent a demon force called the Eternal Punishment Legion to stop the Advent. Heaven wants Zede, hell wants her dead, and I'm in the middle. Gowley frowned. You're between a rock and a hard place. Constantine shrugged. Demons are my bread and butter. As for Heaven's side, the organization applying pressure looks like a fundamentalist crusading group, Holy Imposition Crusader. From what I've found so far, they're not made of real heavy hitters. They recruit by fundraising and pushing traditional church influence. They might be dangerous politically, but not unbeatable. Gowley let out a breath. If Constantine's assessment was right, maybe it wasn't immediately catastrophic. He still didn't fully trust the British occultist's luck, so he called Alfred. Keep an eye on John Constantine, Gao Li told Alfred, and pull whatever intelligence Wayne Industries can get on the Holy Imposition Crusader and the Eternal Punishment Legion. Understood, young Master Gao Li, Alfred replied in his usual impeccable tone. When will you come back to Wayne Manor? It's been a while. Soon, Gao Li said. I've been tied up with research. He felt a stab of guilt thinking of the elderly man waiting at home, but pushed it aside. He truly planned to visit once his research was finished. Better than leaving Alfred fobbed off like Bruce did, he thought dryly. Over the next few days, Gao Li dove back into designing the lost driver. Alfred sent the files he had gathered. There wasn't much on the Eternal Punishment Legion, but the Holy Imposition Crusader matched Constantine's description. A fundamentalist missionary organization without any true magical experts, more a political and social force than an occult heavyweight. That made Gao Li feel better about Constantine's odds. A few days later, though, Constantine himself was far from brimming with swagger. The man who had sounded cocky a week ago wandered the streets like a shell, disheartened, muttering to himself, No, no, not this again. After a long day of research, young Master Gao Li returned exhausted to his luxurious villa. Perched on a small hill at the city's edge, it offered sweeping views. Moonlight poured through the large windows, illuminating the fine furniture and artwork. Gao Li loved this quiet refuge, away from the city's noise and worries, lying on the comfortable sofa and watching the stars. But tonight, one star seemed to be coming closer and closer. Huh? He blinked. He squinted and realized who it was. Clark, whom he hadn't seen in a long time. For Gao Li, it had been ages, though for Clark, the beating in Smallville was still fresh in his memory. Clark looked different now, slightly younger in the face, but otherwise almost exactly like the legendary Superman he would become. He wore his blue suit and red cape. His blue eyes were steady and resolute, stripped of much of the earlier naivete. Clark floated down to the villa entrance and rang the bell. Mr. Wayne, are you home? Gao Li opened the door and gestured him inside. Come in and sit. You don't want to stand at the door talking. Clark nodded and stepped in behind him, carrying himself with quiet pride. Once they were seated, Clark let the moment of peace settle over him, gratitude welling up. He had come to say thank you. Go ahead, Clark, Gao Li encouraged. Do you need something? Mr. Wayne, I want to thank you, Clark said, voice full of sincerity. For what? Gao Li smiled. He could tell Clark had a lot to say. Thank you for telling me about the Fortress of Solitude. Gao Li chuckled. It's not really called the Fortress of Solitude, and I don't know why you use that name. It's an exploration ship from my planet. It still fits, Clark insisted. If you don't mind, may I keep calling it that? Of course, Gao Li said, nodding. Continue. Clark flushed a little and rushed on, words tumbling out. It changed my life. It helped me understand where I came from. I learned a lot, about myself and about the world. I learned to fly, got stronger, and found confidence I never had. I finally understand my purpose and what I have to do. I've grown so much. He finished in one breath and looked at Gao Li with bright, hopeful eyes, incapable of hiding his emotion. Gao Li watched him and broke into a rueful smile. He felt like an adult being proudly shown off to by a child who'd accomplished something. He knew Clark wanted approval, so he offered encouragement. Clark, you're not that uncertain boy anymore, Gao Li said. You're a man who knows what he wants. Your progress is remarkable. You don't need to hide your strength as you did when you were a child. His eyes shone with approval. He patted Clark's shoulder. You're extraordinary. Your kindness, courage, and wisdom matter as much as your power. I approve of you, not just for what you can do, but for who you are. You mean a great deal to this world. You'll shape humanity's future in your own way. Go on. I believe in you. Hearing that, warmth flooded Clark. He knew a lot of his confidence came from Gao Li's past help. Thank you, Mr. Wayne, he said, almost childlike in his happiness. I'll use my powers to protect this world. I won't let you down. Gao Li inclined his head. You'll be a great hero. Whatever you face, I will support you. Clark was about to answer when Gao Li's phone rang. He picked up. Alfred's voice came on the line. Young Master Gao Li, there's been a development concerning John Constantine, the man you asked Wayne Industries to keep an eye on. I thought you should know. What happened? Gao Li asked, frowning. Police and hospital reports say Mr. Constantine apparently jumped off a train for unknown reasons and was severely injured. You should come at once if you need to question him. He's in critical condition and may not have long. A set of coordinates pinged Gowley's phone as Alfred finished. Understood. Thank you, Alfred. Gowley's frown deepened. Constantine had jumped off a train? He was an expert at dealing with the occult, but his body was still flesh and blood, no enhancements. Could he survive a fall from a moving train? Maybe he'd been fighting someone on board and been forced to jump. If that were true, his attackers might still be around. It would be dangerous to leave Constantine defenseless in a hospital with his enemies nearby. Despite Constantine's troublemaking, Gowley couldn't stand by. He can fly, and he's faster than any vehicle, Gowley said, looking at Clark. Can I ask you a favor? Clark's super hearing had already picked up pieces of the call. He was startled but ready. What do you need? Gowley brought up the coordinates on his phone. Take me there, now. Of course, I'll get you there as quickly as possible, Mr. Wayne, Clark said. In moments, Clark had Gowley in the air. Gowley fell silent as he realized how Clark was carrying him, a bridal carry. Stop, can you hold me differently? Clark blinked. Oh, okay. He switched to a sack-over-the-shoulder hold. Gowley scowled. No, more normal. Clark immediately adjusted and carried Gowley on his back. At last it felt less awkward. After a short flight, with Clark moving at astonishing speed, they arrived near the hospital. Mr. Wayne, this is the private general hospital, right? Gowley checked the address and then grew serious. Put me down. I have some uninvited guests to deal with. What uninvited guests? Clark asked, eager. Do you need my help? Gowley glanced at him. Possibly. Why don't you try first? Then I won't have to step in. Clark grinned and punched his palm. Leave it to me. Who are we fighting today? Gowley's expression darkened. If I'm right, they're hell demons. Since regaining his status as a magician in this universe, Gowley's attunement to magic had sharpened. As they approached the hospital, he sensed it, an aura disturbingly like the demonic magics he'd faced in hell. Hell demons? Clark sounded incredulous. They actually exist? You bet they do. I'm a magician. Demons are very real. I've even been to hell myself. Clark's pupils widened. For someone who not long ago had been a small-town kid, this sounded like living legend. You climbed out of hell? Gowley gave him a look. Focus, he pointed to the street corner. There. Go. Clark set Gowley down and walked toward the corner. There, gathered beyond a lamppost, were creatures that were clearly not human. Shirtless, barefoot, muscular, with long fangs, sharp claws, and horns sprouting from their heads. Humans? One demon jeered. Eatable, right? Another grinned, licking his lips. Clark's face hardened at the sight of their twisted forms. You want to eat people? No wonder Mr. Wayne told me to deal with you. Clark's code forbade killing humans, but it didn't extend to monsters like these. He moved at once, kicking one demon so it flew backward with a crash, then grabbing another and slamming him into the pavement. The impact sent tremors through the street. The commotion was loud. Before anyone could see more, Gowley slipped on his magician's ring and traced a few quick gestures. A magic veil dropped over the battlefield, blurring sight and masking the fight from bystanders. The demons, already reeling from Clark's blows, staggered and muttered in dismay. So strong! One of them hissed, astonishment and rage mingling in its voice. The hell demons froze in disbelief. How could a man in strange clothes who had simply appeared be so powerful? They attacked Clark with columns of flame, but his reflexes were beyond anything the demons expected. With a few effortless dodges, he avoided every blast. Then, like lightning, his fist struck, fast and brutal. Another demon exploded under Clark's punch, blood spouting from its mouth and nose, its chest collapsing inward. His power was enormous, his speed blinding. The demons barely had the chance to retaliate, yet they were not easily routed. Quickly, they identified the gap in Clark's fighting. He had little experience against their kind. Several of them cast hell magic, dissolving into a mist to entangle and confuse. Clark threw punch after punch through the fog, but his blows met only empty air, producing sonic booms that merely scattered the mist for a moment before it reformed. No matter how I hit them, it's useless, he muttered, anxious. He had never fought demons before, and the situation was unfamiliar. He wasn't yet the seasoned Superman he might become. Speed and strength weren't enough now, and instinctively he glanced at Gao Li with a look that pleaded for help. Gao Li found the appeal almost amusing. Not long ago, Clark had been boasting about how much he'd improved. To be fair, Clark had made real progress. After his trip to the Fortress of Solitude, his Kryptonian abilities had reawakened, and he'd had a qualitative leap in raw strength and speed. His resilience and will had improved too. Normally, Gao Li might have let the demons teach a lesson, but he was pressed for time and had no intention of wasting it. "Game over," Gao Li said, appearing calmly. He had already condensed the endless ring. "Transform," he intoned, low and controlled. Gold, wood, water, fire, earth, all-encompassing Yinglong. A terrible magical pressure rolled outward. Gao Li had suppressed it somewhat to avoid breaking his concealment too widely, but even toned down the aura made the hell demons tremble. Heads ducked, voices rose in fearful awe. This aura, the Endless Lord. How could the Endless Lord be here? The demons' earlier confidence evaporated. The man they had been toying with might be handled with spells that checked strength, but the Endless Lord was different. Fighting him was unconscionable. Fleeing might even be impossible. Survival demanded bargaining. "We are the Eternal Punishment Legion," the leading demon gasped. "Our Legion commander, Hell Lord Nigel, was appointed by the great demon king Faust." Gao Li tilted his head, amused. "Oh, you're the Eternal Punishment Legion?" He hadn't heard of Nigel or Faust personally, but he knew the hierarchy. Demon kings ruled hell like supreme sovereigns. Demon monarchs were slightly below, lords were beneath them. Divine rank and raw power weren't always aligned, but from what he'd seen, while he couldn't match a true supreme in every regard, he could contend with anyone beneath that level. The demon's attempt at dignity dissolved when Gao Li smiled faintly and shrugged. "You all just look weak." Before they could recover, a flash of night magic unfolded, and Gao Li's hand expanded through an amplification array. He swept his palm through the air, the gesture of a giant, Buddha-like hand, and struck. The mist demons that had thought themselves safe were forced back into solid form the moment they touched his palm. Their magical protections and bolstered bodies meant nothing under the strike. The street shuddered as the great hand crushed them into nothing, flesh and magic collapsing. And when Gao Li withdrew his palm, whatever remained burst into blue flame and turned to ash. Clark stood, stunned. It had all happened so fast. It wasn't that Gao Li's strength exceeded his. After his return from the fortress, Clark's own strength and speed had jumped dramatically, but those qualities had failed against those mist forms. And yet Gao Li had ended them in an instant, as if the problem had simply been erased. The sight made Clark more surprised than anything else. Mr. Wayne was a man even hell feared. Gao Li, acting as if nothing remarkable had occurred, dispelled his transformation and concealment and walked straight into the hospital. Alfred had given him Constantine's room number, and he intended to be direct. Inside, Constantine sat silently by the bed, smoking. He coughed, but otherwise looked more whole than the hospital atmosphere suggested. Gao Li almost wondered why Constantine's coughing fit had followed his dramatic leap from a moving car. "John, I thought you were seriously injured," Gao Li said. Constantine turned to him, ragged and alert. "It's you. I felt some magical fluctuations downstairs. Did you use magic to get here?" Gao Li shook his head, but didn't mention Clark waiting outside. Clark didn't want to be exposed, so he'd stayed downstairs. "No, I wiped out a group of demons downstairs." "Demons?" Constantine's face shifted. "The Eternal Punishment Legion? You know them?" Gao Li nodded. "They were here looking for you. Consider it a favor. Don't thank me." Constantine gave a short, humorless laugh. "Good riddance. The Eternal Punishment Legion are trouble." Gao Li changed tack. "You were supposed to be badly hurt. Alfred said Wayne Industries intel confirmed it. How did you recover so quickly?" Constantine pointed out the window, as if the events were obvious. "You killed a bunch of demons just now. Can't you guess? You recovered by relying on demons?" Gao Li's eyebrows rose. The idea that Constantine had been healed through demonic means wasn't implausible. Many of Constantine's rituals did involve bargaining for power, but it still sounded dangerous. "It's something like that, although he forced me to heal." Constantine's tone grew vague. In truth, Constantine's rapid recovery was the result of a higher-ranking Hell Lord forcing his blood on the magician. Nigel himself had fed Constantine his own demon blood. Nigel had been both a childhood companion and a sworn enemy. The relationship was complicated, shaped by favors, debts, and enmity. Gowley didn't press the finer points. The important thing was Constantine's survival. As for Nigel, Gowley hadn't felt any opponent of noteworthy strength among the demons he'd eliminated, so Nigel was likely not present. If Nigel truly was a Hell Lord, Constantine would have good reason to be wary. "Well, then I came for nothing," Gowley said with a shrug. "You don't have to reimburse my travel expenses. But tell me, why did you jump out of the car?" Constantine's eyes darkened. "I thought you'd been fighting someone and were forced to bail mid-fight. I thought the Eternal Punishment Legion had a hand in it, but maybe not." Gowley waited. Constantine took another drag of his cigarette and coughed violently. When he spoke again, his voice was rougher. "I jumped out of the car myself. It's tied to my past." "Is that so?" Gowley opened the door, disinterested. "Then I'm not interested. Goodbye." He left, stepping back into the night. Constantine watched him go, the cough echoing in the hospital room as he stared at the empty doorway. Outside, Clark remained downstairs, unseen and unacknowledged, another secret kept between them. "Hey," Constantine's voice was raw. Whatever was going on inside his head had finally broken through his usual composure. He needed someone to talk to. That didn't happen often. Who could make a scoundrel look so tortured? Gowley, ever the playboy and opportunist, sat down opposite him. "All right, start your performance. Start talking." Constantine was silent for a long time, then finally forced the words out. "A few days ago, to investigate the Holy Imposition Crusader, I asked a friend to help. His name was Richie Simpson. Richie had no innate magic, but he invented a kind of quantum magic, a way for his soul to enter machines and networks." "Oh?" Gowley's interest snapped awake. "That's huge potential. If you could harness that for technology." "He should have had a great future," Constantine said, voice tight. "But investigating the Crusader turned out to be far more dangerous than I expected." He told the story in clipped sentences. Richie had sent his soul into the network to probe the Crusader's secrets and encountered something far above their usual scale. His physical body overloaded and burst into flame. Constantine tried everything. There was nothing he could do. In a couple of breaths, Richie's body was ash. Gowley stared at him. "You're kidding. He just burned up?" Constantine's face folded inward. "I thought the Holy Imposition Crusader had no patron worth mentioning. I let Richie go in thinking it was safe, but whatever he touched, it connected to a higher existence." Gowley's mind raced. "So the Crusader's secrets tie back to heaven?" "It's very likely," Constantine said. "If Richie inadvertently connected with heaven, a mortal snooping around its secrets would be punished." Gowley's voice softened. "I'm sorry." Constantine dropped his head lower. "I couldn't let him find out his body was gone. If he'd known, the shock would have turned him into a malevolent spirit." Gowley blinked. "What, so you?" "I unplugged the computer, cut the power, let him rest." Gowley exploded. "You unplugged the machine? You killed your friend." Constantine muttered, half to himself, half in defense. It was better than letting him become a malevolent spirit. Richie's quantum magic would let his spirit move through networks and machines. If he demonized, I wouldn't have been able to stop him. Gowley's anger didn't abate. "That's insane. Even if his body was destroyed, why assume he'd demonize? He could have held on." Constantine's eyes were tired, and he explained like a teacher. "When a soul leaves the body, it loses its protective shell. Its emotions and desires are unfiltered and exposed. A soul in that state is vulnerable to becoming extreme. If Richie realized he was dead, it would have been like throwing a match on gasoline. With his quantum abilities, he'd be unstoppable." Gowley narrowed his eyes, understanding and disgust tangled together. Richie deserved better. Before he could say more, Constantine's phone rang. He answered. Less than a minute later, his face went blank, and he let out a keening howl that made Gowley flinch. "I let Zide hide at a friend's house," he croaked, "but the Holy Imposition Crusader raided it. They took Zede, and they killed my friend's entire family." Gowley sat forward. "What?" Constantine's shoulders shook. "The police called me. I was listed as the emergency contact. It happened days ago. Neighbors reported the smell. The bodies were there when they found them." Gowley's head spun. "You told me weeks ago you jumped out of the car. What happened then? You still haven't told me that." Constantine's voice grew hoarse. I keep seeing things, hallucinations maybe, old friends, Flack, Anne-Marie, Gary, people who died because of me or that I accidentally caused to die. The guilt and the pressure built up, and I jumped. Gowley's disbelief turned into a cold sourness. This man was a walking disaster. Everyone around him seemed to end badly. He rubbed his temples. Even if you're cursed, my endless style should be able to handle it, right? Constantine gave a bitter laugh. I don't want to drag you into this. Richie's death showed the Crusaders' depths. When Richie was still connected, he described where he'd reached. If I'm right, it was the center of Heaven's Silver City, the Golden Hall. Gowley's eyes widened. The Golden Hall? Heaven itself? Yes. Constantine's hand trembled as he tapped ash from his cigarette. Heaven is low profile, but it's the top force in the 10,000 sky mirror. God is at the top, and the top archangels are essentially god kings without the title. This isn't some church militia we can storm. So you won't let me help because it's too dangerous? Gowley asked. Constantine's answer was quiet but firm. I don't want to add you to the list of people I've harmed. I have a new plan that should stop the Holy Sun's advent. I don't need you involved. Leave. Gowley shrugged. There was no point pushing. Fine, you've been brilliant before. Hope this plan works. He went downstairs and found Clark, young, stunned, the Superman look replaced with shock. Gowley waved a hand. Come on, snap out of it. Want me to introduce you to John? I can't teach you magic, but he can. Clark forced a smile. Thanks, but no. He hadn't needed to try his super hearing. He'd already heard the conversation. Clark hesitated, curiosity overwhelming his reserve. What are the Eternal Punishment Legion and the Holy Imposition Crusader? And the Holy Mother. Is that Mary? Why would they kill a whole family? Gowley gave him a long look. This is one of the biggest things in the magic world right now. Ever heard the story of Jesus? The Bible was common knowledge in the States. With Gowley's explanation, framed around the story of Jesus and the idea of a Holy Son's advent, Clark quickly grasped the basics of what they were up against. Chapter 103, The Deterrence of the Endless Lord. In short, the prophesied Son of Jesus was about to appear in this era, and three powers, the humans, the gods, and the demons, were all quietly maneuvering to claim the child. Clark's forehead creased. If the Holy Imposition Crusader is an agency of heaven, why are they doing such brutal things? Aren't they afraid they'll be barred from heaven after death? Gowley shrugged. I don't know all the details, but the Holy Imposition Crusader can't be taken as representing heaven in full. It represents only a portion of heaven's forces. Legends say not all angels favor the return of the sun. Many might prefer things as they were. One sun above them was enough. Also, if the Crusader were heaven's lone agent in the mortal world, their influence would still be too limited to do what they're doing now. Wayne Industries, intelligence suggests the Crusaders' internal affairs are a mess. Many high-ranking members live debauched lives and commit atrocities that have nothing to do with piety. Those actions blatantly contradict God's teachings. Even if the Crusader wanted to speak for heaven, God himself would likely be the first to disown them. Clark's voice rose. So that's their excuse? They'll sin in life because someone promised absolution after death? That's outrageous. A heaven that condones this is no heaven at all. It's protecting evil. Gowley cleared his throat. You can't paint every angel with the same brush. Maybe other angels don't even know about the Crusaders' corruption. Don't generalize. Gowley was uncomfortable making sweeping accusations about God, especially in the DC universe where God sat at the top of the hierarchy, so he softened his words. Clark reluctantly nodded, but his unease didn't fade. If what Mr. Wayne says is true, Clark said, I can't stand by and let humanity be enslaved by such a heaven. And apart from heaven, the Holy Imposition Crusader itself, this group that massacres innocent families, can't be allowed to go unchallenged. Calm down, Clark. Think carefully before you act, Gowley warned. You're stronger since you left the Fortress of Solitude, but what about your parents? If you pick a side, you'll make enemies. Someone will come after you. Clark hesitated, then felt something like warmth at the sincerity behind the warning. I'll be careful. I won't reveal my identity. I even came here via outer space to leave no trail. Hide your identity? Gowley blinked. Have you learned the glasses concealment technique? Clark looked puzzled. The what? Gao Li smiled wryly. You're still too young to know. I'm not entirely sure why it works myself, so it's hard to explain. An idea lit up in Gao Li's mind. Kamen Rider, wear a mask, hide the identity. Why not make Clark a one-shot Kamen Rider? Gao Li had said earlier that teaching Clark magic would be difficult, but after his trip to the Marvel Universe, his thinking had shifted. Clark would only need to use night magic once to disguise himself. Gao Li, the Lord of Magic, could lend night magic for a one-time transformation. If some angels might be glad to see the sun's return fail, it didn't mean heaven was united. Besides, Gao Li reasoned, he could cover his tracks. He could do a bit of preliminary work to distance himself from whatever unfolded. Magic masters across the multiverse already assumed that someone with Gao Li's demonstrated power was at least a supreme being, and few factions would risk open war with a supreme entity without concrete proof. With that in mind, Gao Li called after Clark, who was about to leave. If you're determined, I won't stop you. Go home and think it through. This is unprecedented. And if after careful thought you still want to act, Gao Li checked his phone calendar. Come find me in a month. That timing will coincide with the sun's return. Clark straightened. I understand, Mr. Wayne. This could determine the fate of mankind. I'll think seriously. Gao Li pinched his brow. I meant, it's a big deal for you. Just go and think. Clark struck the classic Superman pose and shot into the sky, leaving a sonic boom in his wake. Back in the villa, Gao Li didn't sleep. He drafted a treaty. The next day he contacted the magic masters through Zatanna, masked by a new persona. I won't openly take heaven's or hell's side, he told them, but I promise that, should things go wrong, I will lean toward humanity. For that, I need your cooperation. Allow me to borrow some of your connections in the magic world. The magic masters exchanged glances. A promise from a supreme being who refused to oppose humanity outright was valuable. Gao Li was asking for little in return, only access to their networks. Master Ochi stepped forward. It is an honor to cooperate, esteemed Endless Lord. How may we assist you? Gao Li traced words with his finger, and night magic wrote itself in the air. A contract. I am a Lord of Magic. I've brought into the multiverse a new form of magic. Night magic. I can lend it. This magic won't saddle you with a debt crisis later. Its cost is fixed and declared in advance. The magic masters leaned in. Gawala, quick-minded, guessed the point. Like the Gao Li Wayne? Yes, Gao Li admitted. He's a user of night magic, though he personally cultivated it, but others can borrow it. If someone wants to cultivate night magic, there are strict conditions which I will explain. If someone doesn't want to risk life and death cultivation, they can use night magic for casting directly. The price is the same. As the masters reviewed the contract, their eyes widened. Compared with the terrifying soul-binding debts of ordinary magic, the terms were almost philanthropic. Gao Li's contract contained three main conditions. First, night magic cannot be used for evil, actions that violate ordinary moral standards. If it is, night magic will immediately freeze as per the contract. Gao Li didn't care who borrowed his power, but he would not allow it to be used for wrongdoing. Second, the Endless Lord retains majority ownership of lent magic. If recall is necessary, holders will be notified and the night magic reclaimed. If the night magic was cultivated by the holder themselves, half of that cultivated portion will be extracted. The rest remains with them, but will carry the Endless Lord's imprint and must obey the contract's first and third clauses. Gao Li aimed this clause at systemic abuse in the DC magic world. Those who lent power shouldn't lose the ability to recall it entirely, as happens with some mythic pacts. Third, all experience and knowledge related to the use of night magic must be periodically fed back to the Endless Lord. As long as that is satisfied, other unrelated knowledge stays private. If someone consumes more night magic than their experience value offsets, then non-night magic knowledge may be acquired to balance the debt. In plain terms, the third clause was a leveling mechanism. Every loan also functioned as a training sub-account for Gao Li. He wasn't being sneaky. Most powers granted by supreme beings come with benefits. No one lends strength for nothing. You don't need a magic master ring to cast with night magic alone. If you want to cultivate it, official master rings and drivers will be produced and sold through reputable companies, Gao Li added. He caught himself imagining products and grinning. Different editions, DX, PDX, CSM, UR, each a legitimate merchandise tier. He shoved the thought away. The Magic Masters, stunned, fought to keep composed. From an outsider's point of view, the contract might seem strict, but to any seasoned mage, the terms were a godsend. Before, borrowing magic meant crushing debts, soul markers, and servitude through reincarnation. Your life, your freedom, even your identity could be forfeited. That was the normal price of power. Compared to that, the Endless Lord's 3 clauses were generous beyond belief. Gowley's precautions and assurances weren't just altruism. His recent displays of power had left a mark on the multiverse. In the battles against the giant ferocious beast, against Nabu the God King and Phantom, 2 supreme entities, Gowley had demonstrated such astonishing force that those opponents became, in effect, stepping stones. He'd ended the Dark Uprising almost single-handedly. The rumor mill didn't know the full measure of exaggeration behind those stories, but they'd seen enough to be terrified. War with a supreme being wasn't a trivial matter. Supreme denotes the highest echelons of power, and there's a wide range within that grade. Some supremely powered beings are far stronger than others. But even so, factions hesitate to wage all-out war against an alleged supreme entity unless they have ironclad proof and can afford the cost. Gowley banked on that caution. Even heaven would have to weigh whether declaring war on a powerful supreme being without definitive evidence was worth the price. That, at least, was his calculated deterrent. The Magic Masters, having read the contract and considered the alternatives, bowed to the Endless Lord. To be able to borrow a new kind of magic without the usual existential price felt like liberation. Gowley allowed himself the smallest smile. He would lend night magic when needed, and he would be careful to protect his name. But he also knew the world was changing. The sun's return was close, and that change would ripple through heaven, hell, and earth alike. This was an act of benevolence that would change the entire magic world. In short, I want to use your connections to spread this news far and wide. With your reputations as endorsements, promotion will be easy. Anyone who wants to borrow night magic can come to me. Gowley's request was so straightforward that the Magic Masters agreed at once. They even became the first group to borrow night magic themselves. Only Dr. Fate declined, out of respect for God King Nabu. It wasn't that Kent didn't want to. Even if he had left Nabu, he was a self-taught magic master. But Nabu, God King of Order, could not be seen having his divine envoy borrow other supreme power. Deadman Boston wasn't among them either. His power came from the blessing of the death goddess Molokishna, so borrowing was out of the question. And the Phantom Stranger, who had appeared during the Dark Rise, had long since vanished, elusive and aligned with the Magic Masters. The news spread through the magic world like wildfire. It was no exaggeration to call it an earthquake. Night magic, now widely shareable, felt almost costless compared to anything before. Only the truly malicious mages hesitated. Night magic froze in place when used for evil, and that deterred them. Otherwise, normal mages flooded in to borrow it. For the next month, Gowley hardly left the Magic Master's halls, receiving wave after wave of applicants. 90% folded as soon as they learned that cultivating night magic could be fatal. They turned away. This meant night magic would be used more, debts would grow, and eventually research unrelated to night magic could be seized to pay those debts and be exposed to the Endless Lord. But night magic's lure was irresistible. Besides, exposure to the Endless Lord wasn't the catastrophe it sounded. He was so far above them that whether he learned their secrets or not, he could crush them in an instant. It was like a beggar not worrying that a billionaire might pilfer the penny in his bowl. Once people thought that way, more were willing to take the risk. The 10% who stuck it out had Gowley set up mini versions of the Witch's Sabbath formation. Now that he had been promoted to Lord of Magic, he could wield night magic without human sacrifices. He could perform a solo Witch's Sabbath. Those who overcame despair and reached hope were promoted into Kamen Rider mages. Those who failed and warped into phantom demons were instantly killed by Gowley. In 1 month, Gowley's disciples and grand disciples claimed nearly half of the human magic world. If he united them, he would command the single most powerful human force in the magic world's history, surpassing even the Cold Flame Papacy. Gao Li, though, didn't care much for the title of strongest. It applied only to human mages and excluded divine forces like Nabus. By then, Gao Li had already achieved his goal of creating cover and had gained some benefits of his own. After a month of thought, Clark came to Gao Li with firm resolve. "Mr. Wayne, I've made my decision. I've been using my super hearing and vision to investigate. The Holy Imposition Crusader is a den of iniquity. You were right about them." "Is that so?" Gao Li condensed a sphere of night magic. "Tomorrow is winter solstice. Since you've decided, go for it." "I can give you support to conceal your identity," Gao Li added, "but how you use it is up to you. I won't interfere." "No problem. I'm grateful you're helping," Clark said. Then, puzzled, he asked, "Is that ball of energy the concealment support? How do I use it?" Gao Li smiled. "It's simple. It'll turn you into a Kamen Rider." "Congratulations. From today on, you are a Kamen Rider." Winter solstice, midnight. Swamp Thing came to the Council of Life, the headquarters of the Green of all things. Every member of the council had once been Swamp Thing. "John Constantine found me. He wants me to carry out a plan that will benefit the Council of Life and the Green of all things," he said straight away. The council bristled. John Constantine is untrustworthy. What good could come of his schemes? Tonight is winter solstice. We should focus on the Holy Sun's advent. Constantine's reputation was poor, but Swamp Thing had worked with him and trusted his judgment. "Please, counselors, listen. This involves the Holy Sun's advent. John wants us to help produce a new Holy Sun." The assembly gasped. "What did you say? It's already winter solstice." "I'm telling the truth," Swamp Thing said, and he shared the memories of Constantine's proposal. Days earlier, Constantine had sought him out. "Alec, hear me out. Don't refuse immediately. This will benefit you too." Alec, Swamp Thing's human name, grumbled but agreed to listen. Constantine took a breath. "The prophecy of the Holy Sun's return will come true, but it doesn't specify exactly how. We can use a neutral force to fulfill the prophecy." "Alec, have you ever regretted being Swamp Thing? With a body like yours, you can never be intimate with Abby." Swamp Thing snatched Constantine up in anger. "Constantine, you are as low as they come. Did you come just to make vulgar jokes? The whole species is hanging by a thread." Constantine calmed him. "I'm not joking. Let me explain. The prophecy says on winter solstice a union of nature and the supernatural will bring forth the Holy Sun. If I lend you my body for possession tonight, you, in my human form, could be with Abby. Abby is human, representing nature. You are a plant god, representing the supernatural. That union could meet the prophecy's condition." Alec was stunned. The idea was outrageous and ethically fraught, but his longing for Abby had been unbearable. As Swamp Thing, he looked like a humanoid mass of vines and could never again share human intimacy. If he missed this chance, he might never have another. "But how could such a child compete with the authority of an angel's offspring?" Alec asked. "The prophecy will draw heaven. Wouldn't a child of a high-ranking angel and the Holy Mother outrank any child we produce?" Constantine nodded. "I've thought about that. Don't ask for details. I don't want to recall them. I can guarantee the angel's union with the Holy Mother will fail. If that happens, then as the representative of the Green and the strongest plant god in this force, the child born this way will have top-tier authority and could seize the primary seat on winter solstice." Swamp Thing left Constantine's memory there. The council debated. Constantine may be scheming. What would he gain? There's no harm in trying. If it fails, we lose nothing. If it succeeds, our own Holy Son of the Green. The temptation was irresistible. Even the council, now a choir of vast sentient trees, felt their hearts race at the possibility. "Do it, Alec," they decided. Alec could not resist the chance to feel Abby's warmth once more. He returned to Constantine and contacted Abby. Constantine agreed to the plan. He would shift into a soul form, wander outside for the night, and lend his physical body to Alec. The Green had a technique that would ensure impregnation, they said. Alec could then implant his elemental seed into fertile soil. The prophecy would be fulfilled. The Holy Imposition Crusaders stopped, the demons punished, Constantine's reputation improved, and Abby would become pregnant. In his spirit state, Constantine rehearsed the plan silently. Everything was in motion. If Gao Li could have seen him now, he would have marveled. Only John could pull off such a scheme. greening himself in the most literal sense. Constantine had been forced into hard bargains before, constrained by desperate choices and bargains. He did not want heaven enslaving humanity or hell's plots to succeed. He chose instead to stand, imperfectly, on humanity's side. Despite the Greens' hostility to humanity, the contemporary Swamp Thing still retained his human care for their safety.